One day, out of absolutely nowhere, a massive, mind-boggling tower suddenly spawned right in the middle of the city. It marked the end of the world, throwing humanity into absolute chaos as everyone scrambled, calling it the apocalypse. This guy right here is Jaehwan. Before the world ended, he was just an ordinary guy, scraping by at the very bottom of society. He started climbing the tower way later than everyone else. Because of that, he didn't have any of those fancy hidden skills or secret classes. So, he decided to completely ignore all that useless stuff and poured his heart and soul into just one move, a basic thrust. He trained relentlessly day in and day out, eventually slaying over 50 monsters with nothing but his own sheer strength. His teammates thought his skills were pretty basic, but over time, his sheer persistence started to change everything. His thrusts grew faster and more precise, completely shattering the limits of normal human movement. His raw attack power could now easily rival any hidden skill out there. During his monster slaying and leveling grind, Jaehwan made some true friends and formed humanity's final suicide squad, named Carpe Diem. Up on the 77th floor, the climbers discovered a regression stone. It could send someone back to the exact moment they were summoned into the tower, while keeping all of their memories completely intact. By crushing the regression stone, a person could return to the past, but they'd end up in a parallel universe with zero connection to their current reality. Because of this, there was no guarantee that everyone who used it would ever find each other in the same world again. Around that time, the second tower earthquake struck the world outside. With humanity on the brink of total annihilation, the climbers were forced to make a life or death choice. Many climbers broke their regression stones to flee into the past, abandoning this completely ruined world. But Jaehwan's squad, Carpe Diem, refused to give in to the temptation of the regression stone. They swore to fight together until their very last breath. Jaehwan's team climbed higher and higher, pushing through countless trials until they finally set foot on the 98th floor of the tower. Jaehwan thought things would go smoothly from there, but the boss of this 98th floor purgatory was an absolute nightmare. Spewing molten lava, it melted all their weapons and wiped out almost his entire squad. The beast rammed right into him, sending him flying 8 meters into a wall as he coughed up blood. For the first time, Jaehwan felt utter despair. He thought of his fallen comrades. They had faced so much together and survived it all, only to end up dying like dogs? No freaking way, he couldn't accept this. Yunhwan, Jaehwan's closest friend, lunged forward with his sword to draw the monster's attention away from him. Yunhwan yelled at him to get up, shouting that he couldn't take this monster down on his own. The monster glared, spun around, and drove its massive horn right through Yunhwan's chest. If that wasn't enough, it slammed him brutally into the rocky ground. Jaehwan couldn't just stand by and watch his friend die. He charged forward, risking everything to save him. Suddenly, Jaehwan saw a strange white light connecting the tip of his sword directly to the monster. Without a second thought, he lunged, thrusting his sword straight where the light guided him. The monster shattered into pieces, unable to regenerate. Yunhwan coughed violently, leaning weakly against a boulder. Blood pooled around him. Jaehwan noticed a regression stone tightly gripped in his friend's hand. Yunhwan looked up at him and whispered an apology. Yunhwan was always a cheerful guy. Even inside this brutal, merciless tower, he never let his smile fade. That was why the other climbers affectionately nicknamed him the Clown Knight. But for the first time, Jaehwan saw the Clown Knight lose his smile. Unable to bear the sight, Jaehwan turned away, coldly telling Yunhwan to just get lost. He walked away without looking back even once. Yunhwan let out a bitter laugh. The stone in his hand wasn't actually a regression stone at all. It was just a plain, ugly pebble. But deep down, Jaehwan probably already knew. Yunhwan dragged his heavy, aching body up the stairs. He sat on the edge of a tower window, leaned back, and let himself fall. He felt truly grateful that someone like Jaehwan existed in this harsh world. Standing before the door to the 99th floor, Jaehwan thought about all his friends who had fallen. He kept moving forward. As the doors slowly creaked open, a vast, blinding field of white snow stretched out before him. Jaehwan gasped for air, barely dodging an attack from the boss of the 99th floor, the frost dragon Velkasis. After a brutal clash, Jaehwan realized he was completely outmatched. This frost dragon was absolutely massive and powerful, and it kept spitting out condescending trash talk to crush his spirit. Half frozen by the biting cold, Jaehwan hid inside an ice cave to recover and patch up his wounds, while the frost dragon continued to patrol outside. Biting down hard on a piece of cloth, Jaehwan poured a warm potion over his frostbitten skin. It had been 15 long years since he first reached the 99th floor. Even though he had faced countless deadly threats back on the 98th floor, the danger of the 99th was on a completely different level. Jaehwan grit his teeth to keep from screaming in pain. Outside, the frost dragon continued its relentless rampage, blasting freezing energy everywhere. Its icy breath came from a forgotten land, making it nearly impossible to withstand, even with his maximum cold resistance. If it weren't for the gear left behind by the climbers who abandoned the tower, Jaehwan would have met his end a long time ago. He pulled out his gear, trying to steel his resolve. The dragon sword he found on the 85th floor, the frost armor Yunwan left behind for him, and the bracelet of the Fire King belonging to Han Seoyul, the girl who had passed away. Jaehwan squeezed the bracelet tightly, whispering apologies over and over, as memories of the day she died flashed through his mind. Jaehwan's mind drifted back to his conversation with Jae, the blacksmith of Atopos. The village of Atopos had rebuilt itself after defeating the boss on the 50th floor, even though dead bodies and wounded walkers were still brought back from the front lines every day. Yet, the people never gave up hope. Priests constantly formed emergency rescue units to quickly treat the soldiers who could no longer fight. Blacksmiths inside their forges worked tirelessly to craft new gear for the tower walkers, ready to devote everything for the sake of humanity. Now, Jae was likely the last blacksmith left in Atopos, as there were barely any humans left alive inside the tower. Jaehwan didn't even know what year it was anymore. More than 10 cataclysms had occurred by now. At some point, humans stopped being summoned to climb, and humanity back on Earth was on the verge of total extinction. Just 2 days ago, Helen vanished. People don't age inside the tower, so if someone suddenly disappears, it can only mean one of two things. They either return to the past, or they jumped off the tower. Helen from the potion shop and the blacksmith Jae were among the very few support staff remaining. As Jae stared sadly at a glowing red bar of iron, Jaehwan asked the old man to teach him how to forge. Back in the present, Jaehwan quickly forged a new sword for himself and went back to face the frost dragon. The frost dragon remarked that since the creation of this tower, no human had ever survived all the way to the 99th floor alone, admitting that Jaehwan was indeed an impressive human. Jaehwan scoffed. How ironic that the last one to acknowledge him was a monster, not another human. Sword in hand, Jaehwan charged in once more, only to end up battered and covered in blood. The frost dragon thought this human was incredibly stubborn, pointing out that no matter how hard he struggled, the only thing waiting for him at the end was absolute loneliness. Jaehwan couldn't hear a word it was saying, as his ears rang with what sounded like dogs barking. Shattering the ice blocks controlled by the dragon, Jaehwan pushed forward, refusing to give up. A wise Chinese master once said, "I do not fear the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." Jaehwan was exactly that kind of person. He had no special skills, his only move was a single, mastered thrust. And this time was no different. He unleashed thrust after thrust, but hundreds of strikes only managed to leave a tiny scratch on the frost dragon. Just as the beast opened its massive jaws to blast him again, Jaehwan saw that strange white light once more. Without a second thought, he gripped his sword tight and spiraled straight into the center of the light. The strike shattered the frost dragon's jaw, leaving its tongue hanging out limp. Furious, the beast took flight, spreading its wings to prepare a devastating, wide-range blast. Jaehwan rolled away, desperately dodging its icy spit, but exhaustion caught up to him. He collapsed, gasping heavily for air. The frost dragon sneered, mocking him by saying it would take at least 10 of him to even stand a chance. But then, the dragon let slip a crucial piece of information. It muttered that if humanity's conquest hadn't been manipulated by the Stones of Nightmare, their destiny would have been entirely different. How tragic. Jaehwan froze, his eyes widened as he demanded to know what on earth the Stones of Nightmare were. The frost dragon ignored him, raising its massive claw to stomp him into the ground. But Jaehwan used his quick speed to dodge, darting out of the chamber and slamming the door shut. That was a close call. If the dragon's claws had even grazed him, it would have been game over. Silent and resolute, Jaehwan kept thinking about what the beast had said about the Stones of Nightmare. He was not giving up. 5 years later, he returned and successfully defeated the frost dragon. The system announced that he had defeated the 99th floor boss, with all his stats reaching the absolute maximum. Jaehwan sighed as he sat atop the dying frost dragon, closing the notifications one by one. He glared down and asked the dragon about the Stones of Nightmare. On the verge of death, the beast didn't care to answer, simply telling him he would find his answers on the final floor. The frost dragon slowly crumbled away, transforming into a sword. Jaehwan packed the loot into his bag. As the dragon faded completely, a black door materialized, leading to the 100th and final floor. Without hesitation, Jaehwan stepped inside. Before him, a wall of screens appeared, displaying live feeds of the tower's lower floors. Suddenly, a voice echoed. It admitted it hadn't expected Jaehwan to march straight in here, assuming he would head back to the village first. The voice told Jaehwan to relax, asking him to wait a moment. Suddenly, a system notification popped up, congratulating Jaehwan on being the very first to complete all the tutorial games of World 294. His impressive achievements had been recorded in the immortal Akashic record, and his clear log could only be viewed by the monarch of the Great Lands. Jaehwan stared at the screen, his eyes wide in disbelief. What the hell is this? Right before his eyes, a horrifying scene unfolded as countless corpses sank into the depths. A strange figure stepped out from the water, a massive creature with the body of a man and the head of a beast, dressed in a sleek suit. It looked Jaehwan up and down, remarking that he had recovered much faster than expected. Jaehwan demanded to know who it was. The monster introduced itself with a dramatic flourish as the demon, Beastrain. It couldn't believe Jaehwan had managed to climb all the way to the 100th floor entirely on his own, something that had never happened before. Beastrain was the master of this horrific tower. Jaehwan scowled at the monster. According to the system notification from earlier, everything up until now had only been a tutorial, meaning the real game hadn't even started yet. Beastrain praised him for being so quick-witted. With a snap of its fingers, it projected a series of scenes from the past for Jaehwan to see. Beastrain watched and commented, "So much has happened. Talk about a dramatic movie." It asked Jaehwan if he remembered it all. The pain, the anger, the regret, all of it. Beastrain just kept rambling on and on. It promised to grant him another fresh start, tempting him to play the game all over again from the very beginning. Beastrain leaned in close, whispering in his ear, "Getting a second chance at life is something that only happens in novels, you know?" It pointed out that for a mere human like Jaehwan, getting the chance to start over from scratch while retaining all his current memories was an absolute steal. Jaehwan's eyes widened as a sense of confusion washed over him. This wasn't the end, after all. Wasn't he supposed to save the world after reaching the top of the tower? What the hell was going on? Jaehwan realized that he had been tricked by this demon all along. From the very beginning, there was never a way to stop the tower tremors. And the only thing they could do was to keep conquering the tower. But saving humanity was nothing more than a pipe dream. Jaehwan let out a sigh, looked Beastrain dead in the eye, and said, "I am never going back to the past." Beastrain burst into hysterical laughter, mocking him. "Are you still talking about the past, Jaehwan?" Looking down on him, Beastrain set him straight, explaining that there was no item in the tower, or even in the Great Land, that could ever send a human back to the past. Jaehwan asked what it meant, suddenly remembering what the frost dragon had said before, that things would have been different if their raid hadn't been led astray by the Stone of Nightmare. Beastrain cleared things up, telling him it was never the Stone of Regression, but the Stone of Nightmare. The Stone of Nightmare had no power to send people back in time. Instead, they would be trapped in an endless loop of dreams created by the stone. Beastrain sneered, admitting it never imagined humans would make it all the way to the 77th floor. They were so obsessed with returning to the past that they couldn't escape the temptation of the Stone of Nightmare. Jaehwan fell silent, then quietly replied, "That is true." Thinking he had successfully hooked his prey, Beastrain snapped his fingers and pulled up a digital interface. It began tempting Jaehwan to start the real game, reminding him that it wasn't about returning to the past, but simply starting over from the beginning. Beastrain was incredibly confident that Jaehwan would make the smart choice, but to its utter shock, Jaehwan rejected it without a single second of hesitation. Thanks to Beastrain, he finally understood what this tower really was. He had entered the dream of the nightmare, where the tower was created, and if that was the case, he would hunt down the demon Beastrain and move on to the next gateway. Beastrain shook its head in disappointment. What next floor? There is no such thing. This is the top of the tower, my friend. Jaehwan refused to believe a single word from the demon. While Beastrain was still trying hard to convince him, Jaehwan unleashed a strike that blew its head right off. Beastrain let out a sigh, and even with its head severed, it continued trying to persuade him. It asked Jaehwan what he wanted: items, skills, it could grant them all. But Jaehwan flatly refused. He didn't need any of it. Beastrain let out a sinister laugh as its head slowly regenerated. It told Jaehwan that returning to his original world was completely impossible. Beastrain snapped its fingers again, and another set of scenes appeared. It told him that this nightmare tower was merely a dream. From the very beginning, there was no such thing as the tower shocks. Jaehwan looked at the scene before him. The world was still peaceful and bustling, as if no one had ever died. Jaehwan saw patients lying in hospital beds, and he saw his own body lying there, hooked up to an oxygen mask. B-Strain told him that while he had been in here for a century, only about 1 month had passed in the real world. Jaehwan couldn't land a single hit on B-Strain. The gap between them was as vast as the difference between a human and a dragon. Jaehwan remained silent, not caring at all. He had slain a dragon before, so he would keep picking up his sword and fight on. Realizing that talking until it was blue in the face wouldn't work, B-Strain gave up, and the two clashed in a fierce battle. Covered in wounds, Jaehwan returned to the blacksmith Jay's shop, but the old man wasn't there, leaving him with no choice but to forge his sword himself. Yesterday marked the 72nd time he had challenged B-Strain in his daily battles, yet he still hadn't managed to leave a single scratch on the demon. Despite all that, he was still alive. He didn't know why, but that demon had no intention of killing him. So, no matter how many days or years it takes, he still has to keep fighting. B-Strain sat in the control room biting his nails, anxiously watching Jaehwan train relentlessly with his sword. He kept telling himself he had to be patient. After all, Jaehwan was a product. He had to sell an ultra-premium, highly unique commodity. As a ruler, B-Strain had never seen anyone like him in his entire life. It was a massive headache. He was supposed to be a ruler who cultivated and trained top-tier, ultra-premium products. For a product to fully adapt to the Great Lands, it had to go through 2 steps. The first step was like picking the best seeds in farming, a process of finding quality products through the tutorial. The selected products would then be nurtured through the main game. The second step was cultivating those chosen seeds by supplying them with water and fertilizer. But a product like Jaehwan actually dared to refuse to move on to step 2. Should he just scrap him for good? If Jaehwan died inside the tower, it seemed his soul wouldn't just vanish. B-Strain racked his brain. But what if Jaehwan's soul got damaged because of the massive gap between them? B-Strain got goosebumps just thinking about it. If that happened, the harvesters wouldn't let him off easy. To make the sale, he had to find a way to nurture Jaehwan without hurting him. B-Strain tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair. He was so close to becoming a high-ranking demon, not to mention he still had to pay off the debt he owed for the tower. Jaehwan was such a unique, high-grade product, even gods who normally never did business with demons had reached out to place an order. The more B-Strain thought about it, the more furious he got. Right then, Jaehwan returned. He leaped out of the portal, launching a direct attack at B-Strain. Even the demon was getting exhausted by this. Damn it, what the hell do you want? B-Strain parried Jaehwan's sword strikes while trying to convince him to start the main game. He had explained it 100,000 times already. If he participated, it would be a win-win situation. Why on earth wouldn't he join? Jaehwan didn't even bother to answer. He treated B-Strain's words like white noise, feeling completely annoyed. Lashing out, B-Strain grabbed Jaehwan's chin, lifting him up and screaming in his face, asking him what he wanted. He had already promised to give Jaehwan top skills and items. Why was he being so damn stubborn? Jaehwan flat out refused to listen, repeating the exact same line as always. He would defeat B-Strain and move on to the next floor. B-Strain lost his temper. He had argued until he was blue in the face that there was no damn next floor. Just play the main game, he begged. Jaehwan fell silent for a moment before finally speaking up. B-Strain sat up straight, putting on a mysterious front, and told Jaehwan not to be too shocked. In truth, the universe was made up of more than just one dimension. But Jaehwan wasn't surprised at all. He already knew that. It was basic knowledge. Parallel universe theories were all over Earth, after all. Pivoting, B-Strain went into more detail about how the universe worked. The universe was centered around a primary dimension called the Great Lands. B-Strain even went out of his way to project an image to make it easier for Jaehwan to understand. Earth was just a tiny planet in one of the dimensions scattered alongside countless realms, and they called Earthworld 294. Inside this Tower of Nightmares, walkers would receive skills, items, and stat boosts so they could adapt to the system of the Great Lands. Jaehwan had earned the chance to enter this new world, and demons like B-Strain were there to support those games. Jaehwan asked him, why even do this in the first place? B-Strain smirked slyly, refusing to reveal any more information. With a snap of his fingers, the surrounding space shifted once again. B-Strain knew exactly what Jaehwan was wondering. He wanted to know why, out of all the universes out there, the Towers of Nightmares appeared on Earth, and why humanity had to face such a fate. Supremely confident, B-Strain droned on and on, acting like he could read Jaehwan like an open book. But Jaehwan cut him off. What he actually wanted to ask was why B-Strain was running a place like the Tower of Nightmares in the first place. Caught off guard by the question, B-Strain froze in place for a second. He stammered, trying to make up an excuse, saying that this was just a form of volunteer work. B-Strain broke into a cold sweat but tried to keep his composure. To sound more convincing, he added that demons actually loved volunteering. He claimed there was even a demon on another planet who enjoyed taking care of walkers who had given up. B-Strain tried his best to persuade him, clearly flustered. Behind him, a system message popped up. The Monarch has sent you a message, cultivate the product. Jaehwan's face went cold. Cut the crap. The last time Jaehwan returned from battle, he was covered in wounds, constantly downing potions to heal himself. His stats had already maxed out with nothing left to upgrade. Yet, he still couldn't even lay a finger on B-Strain. Collapsing onto the cold snow, Jaehwan wondered if humans were truly defined by mere stats. Suddenly, Jaehwan felt a sharp jolt. Sitting up abruptly, he wondered, what was that? He felt something strange inside his body. Jaehwan's eyes widened as golden particles floated in front of him. Thinking it was just an illusion, he reached out to grasp them. The particles of light kept rising, sometimes looking like gentle glowing specks, and other times like sharp lines. They constantly changed shape and structure, and instinctively, Jaehwan realized these were the very elements that made up the essence of this world. In that split second, Jaehwan understood everything, completely refusing to believe a single word out of this demon's mouth. He asked, "Who are these monarchs?" B-Strain was thrilled, thinking Jaehwan was finally showing interest, and eagerly began to explain. The monarchs are the rulers of the Great Lands, those who completed the main game and advanced to the Great Lands. Players usually receive power and guidance from these monarchs, and depending on which monarch they choose, their future will completely change. B-Strain tried to sweet-talk him again, promising that if Jaehwan cooperated, it would use its demonic influence to ensure he ended up serving under an amazing monarch. But of course, that all depended on whether Jaehwan would obediently enter the main game. B-Strain was certainly a master salesman, and Jaehwan actually agreed. He promised to leave Earth in exactly 10 days. 9 days later, B-Strain was still sitting in the control room, keeping a close eye on him. Watching him train tirelessly, B-Strain sighed in frustration, thinking, this guy is wasting his time on that useless training again. He's like a boring soldier. It only had to wait a little longer, but then it remembered how foolish it had been to let those nightmare bastards scam it into buying this piece of trash tower. Enraged, B-Strain slammed the table repeatedly, cursing the parents of those scamming nightmares. The truth was, B-Strain had been completely scammed into buying this tower, after being told it was handcrafted by a legendary nightmare and was a rare first-generation artifact. But the thing was so ancient that even B-Strain had no idea when it was actually built. If it had been a third-generation tower like the newer ones on the market, it would have an override feature to shut down the tutorial screen without damaging the product. But with this ancient first-generation junk, there was no way. B-Strain was absolutely livid because it couldn't end the game without the product's consent. So what could it even do? Truly, being broke was a curse. But then, a glimmer of hope sparked in its chest, and it comforted itself with the thought that all of this would finally end tomorrow. When the day finally arrived, B-Strain eagerly asked Jaehwan if he had memorized all the documents. He calmly replied, "Yeah. Now all that's left is to press yes." B-Strain was moved to tears, having waited for this moment for what felt like forever. But right in the middle of its emotional breakdown, Jaehwan suddenly drew his sword and ran it clean through the demon's body. Utterly baffled, it gasped, "What are you doing?" Jaehwan firmly gripped the hilt, spun around, and unleashed a barrage of rapid stabs. Ever since he started seeing those golden particles, his thrusts had become incredibly steady. With every single stab, a strange, profound sensation washed over him, as if something deep inside had finally awakened. Guided by the glowing lines, Jaehwan kept thrusting forward. Suddenly, he saw the glowing lines clearly, and an intense wave of joy hit him. Was this what it felt like to actually be alive? Having been shredded to pieces, B-Strain summoned the black ironwood of the 99th floor to bind Jaehwan, while its own body slowly began to stitch itself back together. It was truly unbelievable. This was the first time it had ever encountered someone like Jaehwan. If he had just cooperated, it would have been a win-win for both of them. After all, without his consent, there was no way to end the game, but the truth was, It had given up on getting his cooperation a long time ago. It sneered at him. Why on earth did you think this tutorial would last forever? This Tower of Nightmares is programmed to automatically end the game exactly 100 days after the tower is cleared. So Jaehwan didn't need to do a single thing. All he had to do was sit tight and wait to transition into the main game. Jaehwan froze for a second, but then his grip on his sword tightened. There was no way he was going to be fooled by this demon's lies. In the Great Lands, Beastrain was known as the Gentleman of Mischief, having lived for 784 years and traveled across 128 different worlds. Throughout those worlds, Beastrain had carried out his disgusting harvesting of various races. Caught completely off guard by this revelation, the demon gasped, wondering how Jaehwan could possibly know all of that. Not only that, Jaehwan also knew that Beastrain planned to sell him off to a harvester known as the Monarch of Darkness. Terrified, Beastrain demanded, Who the hell are you, Jaehwan? Looking down from above, Jaehwan replied that he was indeed the product Beastrain had cultivated for decades, but he no longer considered himself a mere product. Breaking free from his restraints, he lunged forward once more. Beastrain was scared out of his wits, sweat pouring down his face as he watched Jaehwan charge at him with terrifying, fierce momentum. Beastrain took a brutal, agonizing slash, trembling in pure panic as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. Ever since he first set foot on the 100th floor, Jaehwan had been harboring doubts. Was this tower actually just part of a larger nightmare? And was it true that Beastrain couldn't actually kill him? He even began to question if humans really had no value beyond these basic evaluation stats. Was the very fabric of this world about to shatter? After that, countless doubts flooded Jaehwan's mind, and when he ran out of things to question, he finally mastered his legendary stabbing technique, and now he was unleashing it directly on Beastrain. All the while, Beastrain desperately struggled to piece his severed body back together. This was no joke. Beastrain was absolutely furious, baring his fangs and claws to strike back at Jaehwan. He had to admit, reaching the second stage of adaptation right after completing the tutorial was a phenomenal feat. But a mere mortal stood no chance against him. Beastrain pierced Jaehwan with countless sharp thorns, sending blood splattering everywhere. Yet, Jaehwan gripped his weapon tightly. His stats continued to skyrocket, soaring past 9,999,999,000. Beastrain attacked relentlessly, but Jaehwan held his ground. The numbers didn't stop there, they ticked up once more, reaching a staggering 10 billion. Once again, Jaehwan saw that blinding white light. Gripping his hilt, he plunged his sword straight forward, following the light's guidance. Taking the hit, Beastrain was in utter shock. What on earth was this guy? This wasn't adaptation, it was awakening. Beaten to a pulp, Beastrain collapsed onto the ground. Jaehwan looked down at him with pure disgust, warning him never to reduce human lives to mere numbers on a screen. Humans are not products for you beasts to buy and sell. Staring at the blade pointed right at his face, Beastrain shut his mouth, too terrified to utter a single word. Jaehwan did exactly what he promised, defeating Beastrain to climb to the next floor, determined to find the end of this wretched world created by those bizarre entities. Slowly, the space within the tower began to shatter, and a blinding light of truth pierced through his heart. Jaehwan's stats completely broke, displaying as unquantifiable variables. Beastrain could only cry in despair. He desperately begged Jaehwan to stop, crying out that there was no such thing as a next floor. But Jaehwan remained resolute, and it wasn't just out of pure stubbornness. While exploring the lower floors, he had noticed strange, crude carvings. Reading those lines, he could feel the raw agony of an artist pouring out his soul. According to those carvings left by someone named Mulak, the creator of the Tower of Nightmares, there was still something called the Tree of Imagery out there. Holding the Frost Dragon Sword, Jaehwan cast a terrifying glare at Beastrain and asked if he knew how this place became the root of the Tree of Imagery. He reasoned that if there were roots, there had to be a trunk. If he shattered the ceiling of this floor, something was bound to happen. With that, Jaehwan thrust his sword upward, shattering the ceiling into pieces. Beastrain screamed in absolute despair. The system initiated the final calculations for the tutorial, only to error out. It concluded that there were no walkers left in the Tower of Nightmares. Jaehwan had vanished without a trace. The tutorial was officially over. When Jaehwan opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar forest, surrounded by a horde of monsters bearing their fangs. The beasts rushed him all at once, but with a swift swing of his sword, Jaehwan took one down in a single blow. But then, an absolute giant emerged, and his previous slash wasn't enough to put it down. Jaehwan put more weight into his swing, and the beast was instantly obliterated. After wiping out the monsters, he pulled out their horns, threw them over his shoulder, and prepared to leave. But suddenly, a group of insectoid monsters blocked his path, aggressively pointing and screeching at him. Too bad for them, Jaehwan didn't understand a single word. Even with his analysis skill, he preferred to be a reasonable man. Pointing at the pile of horns he just collected, he offered them a deal. They could have them, but in exchange, they had to tell him where he was. But the monsters refused to listen. Hell-bent on a fight, they charged straight at him. Jaehwan could only sigh. What absolute insect brains, they were practically begging for a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Left with no other choice, he wiped them all out. The bugs were in complete shock that a mere mortal had decimated them. Jaehwan grabbed one by its antennae, demanding answers, but the creature refused to speak. With its final breath, it hissed, "I'll kill you," before biting its own tongue and dying. Jaehwan sighed. He had assumed they were weak, but their sheer willpower was surprisingly strong. Looking at the severed antenna in his hand, he decided to pile up some dirt and plant it there as a makeshift grave. Searching their bodies for loot, Jaehwan managed to find a small spatial pouch. Luckily, he now had a place to store his items. However, since leaving the Tower of Nightmares, he could no longer access the system interface. He had assumed he would at least be able to use the system interface of other world variations, like the Great Lands, but absolutely nothing worked. Just thinking about that lying bastard, Beastrain pissed him off. Luckily, he could still use his analysis skill to identify items. He examined the pile of gems he had acquired before tossing them all into the spatial pouch. The spatial pouch had its limits though. With so many items left, Jaehwan had no choice but to throw some away. Moments later, he sifted through his loot again, realizing absolutely none of it was useful. He unrolled a map he found. It was a map of chaos, a location that Beastrain had completely left out of his briefing. Nearby, another group was out hunting. It consisted of a red-haired girl and a few big burly men. The girl threw a dagger, completely missing the monster and landing it right in the knee of the red-haired leader. Although he was annoyed, she was cute, so he let it slide. But things didn't stop there. That red-haired girl was even going around provoking a two-horned monster and dragging it right toward them, while Jaehwan watched the whole thing play out from high above. From what he could tell, she actually seemed to be the strongest of the bunch. Still, he couldn't wrap his head around how a crew with such low levels and basic skills had managed to survive the nightmare. Meanwhile, the red-haired guy grit his teeth, ready to unleash his ultimate move, Breath of the Fire King, and charge into the fight. But out of nowhere, another dagger came flying right at his face. The culprit was none other than the red-haired girl, who playfully teased, "Oops, my bad." Having reached his absolute limit, the red-haired guy snapped and started screaming curses at that toxic-mouthed bitch. She just shrugged it off like it was nothing, casually pointing out the beast right in front of him. Just as the monster opened its massive jaws to bite the guy in half, Jaehwan dashed in and took the beast down in a single blow. Once the group finished harvesting the two-horned monster carcass, Jaehwan decided to tag along with them. The crew was practically over the moon, constantly celebrating their major haul from the two-horned beast. Jaehwan quietly pondered to himself. The monster he had previously taken down with his exploding slash had at least 5 horns, leading him to believe that more horns meant a much stronger beast. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl was fuming because her plans had been completely ruined. Biting her nails in sheer frustration, she turned on her heel and demanded to know who Jaehwan really was. There was absolutely no way an adapter in Chaos could one-shot a two-horned monster with such a basic attack. When she asked where he came from, Jaehwan just muttered back with a question of his own, "What on earth is Chaos?" The girl froze, completely dumbfounded by his question. Meanwhile, the red-haired guy eagerly started prying into Jaehwan's personal life. Jaehwan simply claimed he was just a passerby who didn't even speak their local language, leaving the red-haired girl deeply skeptical and lost in thought. Jaehwan had taken down that two-horned beast with 0 effort, and he didn't even have to use a single skill. On top of that, her appraisal skill didn't even work on him, even though his willpower registered as nothing more than a non-adapter. Leaning in close, she whispered to Jaehwan that the number of adapters in Chaos who could one-shot a two-horned beast could be counted on one hand. Once again, she demanded to know who he was and where he came from. Jaehwan just repeated himself, "Seriously, what the hell is Chaos?" This completely set her off. The red-haired girl lost her temper, seriously doubting if he even understood a word she was saying. Jaehwan understood her perfectly fine. But when it came to the question of who he honestly had no idea how to answer. His home, his identity, and every single relationship he had back on Earth had become completely meaningless the very second he stepped inside the tower. In return, he had gained new comrades and memories to cherish. But once the tutorial ended, every single one of them vanished, as if they were nothing more than a fleeting illusion. Even though those comrades who fought by his side were surely alive somewhere back on Earth, and his reward was keeping all those memories when starting over, they wouldn't remember him or a single thing they had been through together in that tower. So, Jaehwan simply replied, "I don't remember a thing." The red-haired girl feigned sympathy at first, but not even 3 seconds later, she was screaming right in his face. There was no way she was buying it. Even if he claimed to have amnesia with the straightest face, she wasn't falling for it. Jaehwan flatly pointed out, "I never said I had amnesia," but she just kept grumbling, refusing to let it go. She crossed her arms and asked, "What? Are you some high and mighty lord of the abyss or something?" Jaehwan glanced around, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword as he drew it. He had been feeding smaller swords to his main weapon. The moment the red-haired girl laid eyes on it, she froze in shock, whispering, "A spirit weapon." She immediately assumed that Jaehwan wasn't actually strong himself, but rather, he just possessed an incredibly powerful weapon. More importantly, the rest of the crew had also laid their eyes on the spirit weapon in Jaehwan's hand, and dark, greedy thoughts began brewing in their minds. Terrified that Jaehwan might completely mess up her mission, the red-haired girl suddenly had a brilliant idea. She promised she would stop prying into his identity. Instead, she wanted to make him an offer. Introducing herself as Mino, she gave him a brief, simple breakdown of chaos. Soon, their conversation shifted toward the topic of teaming up. The group led by the red-haired guy was actually a gang of cutthroats from a guild called the Red Fox. It didn't take long for Jaehwan to realize that Mino was secretly asking him to eliminate them. As night began to fall, the red-haired guy suggested they camp there for the night. Wandering around in the dark was suicide, as they risked aground or provoking horned monsters. While the group set up a campfire to rest, Jaehwan simply laid back under a tree. According to the map, there was a village nearby. He reached out, catching a few glowing particles drifting through the night air. With his heightened senses, Jaehwan could easily overhear the whispered plotting of the red-haired group. They were currently discussing a plan to assassinate him. They believed that Jaehwan's strength came entirely from his spirit weapon, an artifact that could only be acquired in the abyss. Jaehwan heard every single word, knowing full well they were planning something sinister. They would probably lose their minds if they found out he had actually pulled this weapon from the roots of the Tower of Nightmare's Tree of Illusion. From what that bastard up there had told him, the tower's standard gear wasn't even that impressive, and he certainly didn't think this place was the almighty land either. As the group on the other side slowly began to make their move, Jaehwan remained completely still, showing no reaction whatsoever. Out of nowhere, Mino rushed over in a panic, whispering urgently, "Are you seriously just going to lie there? Do something, quick!" She grabbed him by the collar and demanded, "You have that sword that devours other weapons, right? Hurry up and use it to take them down." Jaehwan casually replied, "I already told you, I don't." He had actually let the Red Fox guys borrow his spirit weapon just because they wanted to check it out during their night watch. Even Mino was completely speechless. She couldn't freaking believe that Jaehwan would let someone else borrow his spirit weapon for such a brain-dead reason. Right then, the Red Fox gang showed up and surrounded the two of them. They obviously had zero intention of giving Jaehwan's weapon back, even mocking him by promising to make good use of it. They sneered that such a powerful sword was completely wasted in Jaehwan's hands, so they might as well put it to use for him. Mino gritted her teeth in anger. These bastards really had a death wish. But Jaehwan didn't react at all. He wanted to see Mino's real capabilities, so he just stood there. In an instant, the Red Fox gang charged at them all at once. Mino threw her daggers with deadly precision, striking several of them right in their vital spots before delivering a brutal kick to another guy's face. Coldly smirking, she summoned even more daggers, ready to keep the fight going. "I'm already in a pretty bad mood, boys. Every single one of you is going straight to hell." The red-haired leader's face darkened. He had felt something was off when Mino lured those monsters straight to them. She really was a ruthless witch. Gritting his teeth, he demanded to know who had hired the Dark Forest clan. Mino just gave him a playful, mocking look and waved her hand without giving an answer. Instantly, a barrage of daggers flew toward the Red Fox gang. The Red Fox clan had slaughtered countless non-adapters who were completely clueless and defenseless. So Mino was absolutely sure that plenty of people in Chaos wanted them dead. But there was no way the Dark Forest clan would move just for a bunch of pathetic losers like them. The red-haired guy pulled out Jaehwan's stolen weapon, completely confident that Mino would die right here. But Mino remained calm, scanning her surroundings to size them up. These guys were at least first-stage adapters, and there were as many as 40 of them hiding nearby. That was exactly why the red-haired leader was so confident about taking on both the Witch of the Dark Forest clan and a guy who could kill a two-horned monster in a single blow. He had prepared meticulously. If he had known stealing Jaehwan's spirit weapon would be this easy, he wouldn't have gone as far as calling in their clan leader. The Red Fox clan leader, Clant, was a third-stage adapter. He was several times larger than a normal human, with a mouth full of jagged teeth and a long tongue dangling out. More than half of the Red Fox clan's forces had gathered here just to hunt down Mino. Mino tried to put on a brave face, but deep down, she wasn't sure she could beat the clan leader in a one-on-one fight. She turned to Jaehwan, pulled a gem out of her pouch, and tossed it to him. She told him to take it and run, admitting she wouldn't be able to protect him. Jaehwan caught the gem. Even though he knew it was actually a dreamstone, he still asked, "What is this?" Mino claimed it was a stone of return, saying that using it would teleport the user to the nearest castle and that it was the only one she had. Jaehwan clenched the gem tightly. This wasn't the kind of stone that could take someone back to the past. It was something that could actually save someone in the present. What if, back then, instead of a useless stone, he had been able to give this actual stone to Yunhwan? Jaehwan murmured, asking Mino, "If there was a way to go back to the past, would you do it?" Mino stared at him, wondering if he had a screw loose for asking such a random question at a time like this. Mino told him she wouldn't. She said she would live her life to the absolute fullest, and if she had to die today, so be it, but she would never choose to go back to the past. Jaehwan patted Mino on the shoulder and said, "You're not dying today." He drew another sword from his sheath and charged forward like lightning, completely tearing through the enemy formation. The clan leader barked an order to deploy the Fire King's 14th formation. As the others rushed forward eagerly, Jaehwan didn't even blink. He unleashed his wayward thrust, piercing right through the enemy line and stabbing the clan leader directly. The clan leader couldn't block it. The tip of the blade pierced right through his iron armor and into his body. Jaehwan walked right past the clan leader and stopped in front of the red-haired guy. Shaking like a leaf, the guy held out both hands to return the sword. Jaehwan took back his ice sword. With a light poke, the remaining thugs who were trying to run evaporated instantly. Mino froze, her jaw dropping as she tried to process what on earth had just happened. She had thought Jaehwan was just a gullible, easygoing guy, assuming he was an idiot, with absolutely no guard up. But that wasn't the case at all. Mino had got it all wrong. Jaehwan was simply way too powerful. Once again, Mino asked him who he really was. Jaehwan gave a faint smile and replied, "Don't you already know who I am? Did you lose your memory too? I thought I was the only one." Flustered and annoyed, Mino held out her hand, demanding that he give back her return stone from earlier. But Jaehwan calmly replied that he had dropped it. Mino threw a massive tantrum, unable to believe that Jaehwan had lost such an incredibly expensive item. Ignoring her fit, Jaehwan kept walking and headed back to the campfire to resume his rest. Mino still didn't give up and desperately searched for the return stone. Meanwhile, Jaehwan sat quietly feeding weapons to his ice dragon sword. Staring into the fire, he murmured that Mino already knew his true identity. He was simply a human. Mino didn't believe him and slumped to the ground in frustration. Jaehwan asked her back, "Are you human?" Mino replied that she was close enough. Clenching his fist, Jaehwan muttered, "That's good enough," and then fell silent. An awkward silence settled over them. The next day, the two resumed their journey. Mino still isn't giving up. She asks Jaehwan if he really doesn't remember anything about his journey through the Great Land before coming to Chaos. Mino sighs again, saying she is so jealous that he has zero memories. Jaehwan finds this confusing and wonders what is so great about losing your memories. He then asks, how did Mino even end up here in the first place? Mino's face suddenly goes stiff. She tells him that if he found out the answer to that right now, he would definitely regret it. After walking for a while, the two of them arrive at Gorgon Fortress. Jaehwan notices something that looks like the summoning circle from the first floor of the tutorial tower. Suddenly, the circle glows bright. Jaehwan freezes in shock as he sees a crowd of people inside, screaming and crying in agony. Mino sighs, remarking that it looks like another bunch of poor bastards just got summoned here. She notes that this was exactly how she ended up in Chaos too. Watching the despairing crowd, A wave of endless sorrow washes over Mino as she murmurs, "Welcome to the world of death, chaos. If you die in the Great Land, you get sent to chaos. But if you die in chaos, that is truly the end of the line. At that point, you just become nourishment for the Tree of Illusion." Right on cue, a troop of soldiers begins marching out of the fortress. They hand out clothes, order the newly summoned people to line up, and lead them toward the briefing hall. Mino goes over to greet the military commander, a man named James. He asks her why she suddenly showed up at the northern checkpoint. Mino avoids giving a straight answer and asks James to just let them through quickly to get it over with, but James flat out refuses. He explains that they recently received strict orders requiring everyone entering the fortress to present identification. Mino tries another tactic. She leans in close, sweet-talking James while secretly slipping him a horn as a bribe to let them pass. James's eyes light up at the sight of the valuable item. He quickly pockets it and turns a blind eye, letting her through. But then, he turns around and demands to see Jaehwan's ID. But Jaehwan has no such thing. Mino deliberately holds back from helping, teasingly telling him that she might help if he begs her for it. Jaehwan completely ignores her. Seeing that he isn't being allowed inside, he reaches for his sword, ready to draw it. Realizing what he is about to do, Mino panics and rushes to stop him. She breaks into a cold sweat, thinking this guy is absolutely out of his mind. Is he seriously planning to butcher the fortress guards right here? Imagining a bloody scene where Jaehwan wipes everyone out with a single strike, Mino quickly steps in to intervene. She is about to offer another bribe, but right at that moment, someone else arrives. The second this man appears, the guards instantly snap into formation and salute him. He is a famous figure in Gorgon Fortress, known as the most incorruptible guard captain in all of Chaos. It is the stubborn captain of the Northern Guard, Carlton. He demands that James explain what is going on. James is scared out of his wits and does not dare to lie. James confesses that Jaehwan is trying to enter without any identification. Carlton coldly begins reciting a list of regulations. In the event that an individual fails to verify their identity, the captain of the Northern Guard has the authority to deny them entry. This authority lies solely with him. According to the Gorgon Fortress Entry Regulations, Chapter 27, Section 4, this rule is clearly established. As Carlton recites the law, he activates his Order of Law skill, forcing all the soldiers and even Mino to drop to their knees. However, this skill has absolutely no effect on Jaehwan. With a swift swing of his sword, Jaehwan easily shatters the shackles around Mino's neck. Carlton, who is passionately reciting the rules, stops dead in his tracks, unable to believe his eyes. He can't comprehend how anyone could break his order of law so effortlessly. Jaehwan calmly asks what kind of information is required on the ID, and Carlton patiently answers. To verify someone's identity, the document must list the name of the organization they belong to. It also requires their occupation, details of their primary skills, and information regarding any active status conditions, along with their criminal record and their soul's corruption rate. Jaehwan cuts Carlton off before he can even finish speaking. He flat out states that he doesn't give a damn about any ID, and he has absolutely no intention of verifying himself. Carlton is left feeling highly skeptical. He questions how his order of law failed to work on Jaehwan. Carlton waves his hand, casting Silverbind while citing yet another set of laws. According to the Gorgon Fortress Detention Code, Chapter 2, Section 6, he is placing Jaehwan under arrest. A massive barrage of iron chains instantly flies toward Jaehwan. But with just a slight, effortless movement, Jaehwan shatters the chains completely. The onlookers stand frozen, with their jaws dropped, unable to believe what they are witnessing. Jaehwan then points at Mino and asks, "Can't I just pay a bribe like she did?" Hearing this, everyone involved completely freezes up, trembling in sheer terror. Without waiting for an answer, Jaehwan tosses a horn directly at Carlton, telling him to take it and let him through. Sweating profusely, James screams at Jaehwan, demanding to know how he dares to bribe the captain, shouting that he should be executed on the spot. Carlton raises a hand, signaling James to shut his mouth. He tightly grips the horn, his attitude shifting faster than a toxic ex. Carlton suddenly greets Jaehwan with deep respect, calling him the emissary of the Greens. Right after that, Mino is forced to undergo a soul check. The scan reveals her corruption rate exceeds 15%, meaning she needs treatment as soon as possible. Jaehwan, on the other hand, has absolutely no clue what on earth soul corruption even is. Soul corruption is a chronic condition that afflicts everyone living in chaos. Simply existing in this place slowly corrupts your soul, and once that corruption hits its maximum limit, you are executed on the spot. Now, it's Jaehwan's turn. Carlton points the scanner at Jaehwan's head. The device displays an unmeasurable level of soul corruption, leaving everyone around them completely stunned. The screen reads 0%. Carlton chuckles, placing the soul stone back into Jaehwan's hand, and advises him not to do that again, handing over a magic stone to someone just like that. As Mino and Jaehwan were allowed through the gate, James couldn't wrap his head around why Carlton had just let them go. Carlton asked him in return if he even knew what the magic stone was actually used for. He then took off his glove, revealing his hand, which had turned pitch black from holding the spirit stone. Only members of the Greens can use these magic stones. They are the only ones who can possess these crystals and avoid being corrupted. Even though Jaehwan didn't look like he belonged to the Greens, Carlton had witnessed him wielding the crystal completely unharmed. It wasn't that Carlton trusted Jaehwan himself, but rather, he trusted the man's soul. When Carlton had tried to measure the corruption level of Jaehwan's soul, the device ended up returning an error. According to what he knew, the measuring device was never wrong. The only situation where the device would fail to measure soul corruption is if that soul is more pure than anyone else in chaos. Whether Jaehwan is one of the Greens or not, they simply need someone who is capable of using the magic stone. The people inside the castle will make their judgment on Jaehwan right now. Carlton didn't want to talk about this any longer, since their duty was done. Instead, he turned his attention to James, questioning him about the bribe from earlier. Meanwhile, Jaehwan and Mino wandered through the fortress, and man, the streets were confusing as hell. He even had to drag along a totally brain-dead Mino. Earlier, Carlton had passed judgment on Mino's offense, citing Article 7, Section 34 of the Gorgon Fortress Entry Law. Anyone who does not have or fails to provide proper identification, as well as those who forge documents or use someone else's pass, may be denied entry, or even face heavy penalties for their actions. However, because Jaehwan pleaded on Mino's behalf, she was let off the hook. On top of that, bribery of any form is strictly forbidden under Article 11, Section 6 of the Gorgon Fortress Entry Law. Anyone who offers bribes, whether in money or valuable items, along with whoever accepts them, will be punished. Mino had been hit by the order of law's effect, leaving her completely dazed and out of it, and it would take some time before she finally snapped out of it. Jaehwan went around asking where he could find a master blacksmith to forge his ice dragon sword, completely unaware that someone was keeping a close eye on him. After a while, Mino finally returned to normal. She looked around in a daze, wondering when on earth they had even entered the town. Jaehwan was just waiting for this moment, so they could go their separate ways and keep her from slowing him down. But Mino absolutely refused to let him go. Gritting her teeth, she stomped after him, insisting on being his guide, since she knew this place like the back of her hand. Jaehwan could only sigh in sheer helplessness. He told her he was planning to look for a nightmare, and as luck would have it, Mino knew exactly where to find one, so she offered to lead the way. They hadn't even gone a few steps before. They were stopped by a bunch of blind fools trying to steal Jaehwan's sword. The bandits were a group of 4 brothers, and the youngest one, who was absolutely massive, was surprisingly only 12 years old. He was pumped up, carrying an axe right behind his older brothers. This was definitely an eye-opener for Mino. Talk about being way too built for a 12-year-old. The thugs demanded that he hand over the sword, but Jaehwan wasn't having it. The giant youngest brother charged with his axe, but with a single swing of Jaehwan's sword, both of the kid's arms were sliced off, flying 8 meters away as he collapsed motionless on the ground. Come on, who's next? Seeing his little brother get wrecked, the leader flew into a rage, and all 3 of them rushed forward to avenge their beloved sibling. Needless to say, they got absolutely destroyed. As the thugs lay there completely motionless, Mino was astonished to realize that Jaehwan only had a single move, a stab that came in light, medium, and heavy variations. It reminded her of someone else who only used a single technique as well, though that person used slashes instead of stabs. Mino then asked him why his initial attack had missed earlier. Jaehwan explained that he was aiming at the rooftop because he noticed someone using a stealth skill over there, so he just threw a warning stab to mess with them. To him, it was no big deal. Mino was completely speechless. She eagerly tried to suggest some names for his signature stabbing technique, but he rejected every single one of them. He just didn't care for flashy names. The two then continued on their way to a workshop called Twilight's Fall. This was a blacksmith shop built by a nightmare, and it also happened to be the largest workshop in Gorgon. An employee there, a blacksmith named Jaehwan, informed them that placing an order today would take some time, as the workshop master was currently away. There was only a vice master around, but he was busy today too. If they were looking for something, they'd be better off buying pre-made gear rather than placing a custom order. Deep inside the workshop, the vice master, Maykal, and his apprentices were huddled around a sword made from the horn of a four-horned monster. Maykal pulled out a horn from his pocket and challenged his apprentices, stating that if anyone could manage to put a single hole in it, he would hand over his position as the vice master of Twilight's Fall to them for the day. The apprentices took turns using their tools to chip away at it, but not a single one of them succeeded. Maykal sighed, telling them they were still way too green, and with hands as soft as noodles, they'd never even leave a scratch on that horn. Jaehwan pushed past Naven and walked right in, offering to give it a shot. Maykal had no idea who he was, simply assuming he was just some wandering craftsman. He readily agreed, proudly puffing out his chest. He bragged that only his top-tier skills could handle a horn like this. After all, it was a horn from a quad-horn monster, an extremely difficult material to process. Jaehwan walked over to the horn and tapped it with a single finger, piercing right through it. He casually spun the horn on his finger, ready to act as the shop assistant today. Before 3 seconds could even pass, the pierced horn shattered into pieces right before everyone's shocked eyes. Maykal practically exploded with rage, screaming as he grabbed Jaehwan by the collar. That horn was insanely expensive. A quad-horn's horn was worth a fortune, so how the heck were they supposed to explain this to the merchant guild that placed the order? Jaehwan calmly replied that he would compensate them with a much better horn, but Maykal couldn't bring himself to trust a beggar like Jaehwan. How could a guy like him possibly have anything better than a quad-horn's horn? Jaehwan reached into his pocket, pulled out a horn from a pentahorn garnak, and handed it to Maykal. He offered it as compensation, mentioning he didn't have a quad-horn's horn on him anyway. Holding the ultra-rare horn in his hands, Maykal's eyes lit up. He immediately ordered his apprentices to shut down the shop. As today's assistant manager, Jaehwan was free to use all the equipment and staff however he pleased. Seeing that everything was settled, Mino left Jaehwan to his work and headed out to take care of some business of her own. Maykal asked Jaehwan how he managed to get his hands on a pentahorn. Shrugging off his coat, Jaehwan simply replied that he went out and got it himself. Maykal couldn't believe Jaehwan had hunted a pentahorn all by himself. People capable of such a feat were incredibly rare in all of Chaos. Putting on an apron, Jaehwan explained that he needed a scabbard, but had never made one before. Maykal thought his ears were playing tricks on him. Jaehwan wanted to use a garnak's horn just to make a scabbard? Just how mind-blowingly amazing did the sword have to be for that? Jaehwan then pulled out the Ice Dragon sword. Maykal took it, assuming it was just a replica. Replicas made by nightmares were incredibly rare, but he still thought Jaehwan should just forge a new sword instead, even if this replica was stunning. Suddenly, the sword in Maykal's hands began to tremble violently, startling him into dropping it. The sword literally bit into the pentahorn's horn. Breaking into a cold sweat, Maykal realized from the spiritual energy that this sword seemed to contain the soul of an elite race. After devouring the horn, the Ice Dragon sword began to show signs of evolution. Judging by the drastic changes in its appearance, this was going to be a major evolution. Once the evolution finished, the wielder would need to give it a new name, because a spirit sword undergoing a major evolution completely loses its original name. Jaehwan scolded the Ice Dragon sword, warning that if it kept eating without permission, he was going to rename it the Pig Sword. He pulled out another horn from his coat and handed it to Maykal, wanting to see how the blacksmith refined materials into any shape he wanted. Having Jaehwan's trust like this put a serious amount of pressure on Maykal. He resolved to show Jaehwan the true skills of a Twilight's Fall blacksmith from Gorgon Fortress. Meanwhile, Fortress Commander Dohin Javier sipped his tea while listening to his subordinate's report. This subordinate was none other than the stealth scout Jaehwan had easily spotted earlier. The guy hadn't even realized what hit him before waking up unconscious on a rooftop. And because of that, he had completely lost track of Jaehwan. The commander pondered, realizing that anyone who could detect a third-stage adapter's stealth skill had to be at least a fifth-stage adapter. He ordered his men to deploy more troops and find Jaehwan, even if they had to search every single nook and cranny. As the subordinate took his orders and left, Dohin let out a heavy sigh, feeling a massive headache coming on. Clenching his fists, he silently prayed for the fortress master to hang in there just a little longer. Over at a local tavern, a large screen was broadcasting a video of a young man who had cleared the 99th floor all by himself, though his face was blurred out. The crowd was buzzing with gossip, wondering what had happened to the guy. Rumors were circulating that he had run away and abandoned his duties. Most of the patrons dismissed the video as fake, arguing there was no way anyone could clear a first-generation tower all by themselves. Suddenly, the tavern door swung open, and Mino quietly stepped inside. Because of her stunning looks, she instantly drew everyone's eyes. She walked over to the bar and sat down. A drunk guy tried to slide over and hit on her, but Mino gave him such a savage glare that he quickly shut his mouth. Feeling completely frustrated, she ordered a drink and kept chugging until she was totally wasted. She couldn't stop complaining to Kay, the tavern owner, about Jaehwan, a guy who was giving her one massive headache. Kay let out a sigh, telling her to cut out the drunk act. She could get any guy she wanted, so why was she so stubbornly hung up on that one tree? Mino was still fuming, and just thinking about Jaehwan made her blood boil. He was a complete wrecking ball, swinging his sword around without a single care for the rules of this place, and constantly saying the weirdest things. She grew quiet and sad, admitting that Jaehwan made her feel utterly worthless. Everyone here worked their hearts out, yet this guy had crawled out of nowhere, looking down on her, as if they belonged to completely different worlds. Every time she saw that look on his face, it drove her absolutely crazy. Kay patted her head to comfort her, advising her to stay far away from Jaehwan. If she got mixed up with him, she might end up dead in a heartbeat. Just then, a golden pigeon flew in and dropped a letter from Carlton right into Mino's hand. She immediately got a very bad feeling about this. Just as she was about to open it and take a look, someone sneaked up right behind her. Startled, Mino quickly drew her weapon to fight back, but the stranger grabbed her hand, locking her weapon in place. He gave Mino a sharp glare. It wasn't that he disliked getting his hands dirty, but he was too busy today and would have to save it for another time. He asked Mino for a favor. Meanwhile, Megan was thrown to the ground, rolling on the floor. Staring at the five-horned monster in front of him, he trembled. How on earth was he supposed to forge a sword from something like this? How could a sword even turn into something like this? Jaehwan grabbed him by the collar, telling him to snap out of it because they were right in the middle of refining. If you're going to help, then do it right. Megan panted heavily and gave up, completely exhausted. He couldn't even bring himself to touch it. This horn was on a whole different level, way beyond his refining skills. Jaehwan placed his hand over Megan's eyes. It wasn't a matter of skill, but perception. Megan awakened the first stage, suspicion, the power to shatter the true nature of reality by doubting the world itself. As Jaehwan pulled his hand away, Megan awakened the second stage, understanding the power to see through the corrupted world. Megan stared back at the horn once more. Suddenly, a burst of black slime shot up, revealing a five-horned monster with its long tongue lolling out. Megan let out a curse, stumbling and falling flat on his back. Jaehwan urged him, "You promised to help me, so do it right." But Megan was trembling so hard he couldn't even stand up. The true form of the five-horned monster was simply too horrific. To think he had been using his basic, amateur skills on such an absolute abomination? Megan thought he had to be dreaming. He frantically looked around, then bolted toward the door, desperate to wake up from this nightmare. Jaehwan let out a sigh and clicked his tongue, but he didn't stop him. Megan threw the door open, screaming for help. But right on the other side of the door was a pile of skulls and bones, freezing him dead in his tracks. The skulls demanded to know if he was done refining, whispering that a fool had no right to look upon this place yet. Shaking uncontrollably, Megan widened his eyes in disbelief, wondering how he could possibly survive in a world like this. Why did he have to die here? Meanwhile, Jaehwan was facing off against the monster all by himself. It didn't take long for him to bring it down. Megan screamed in utter despair, tears and snot streaming down his face as he sat there, completely dazed and muttering to himself. Some things in this world are completely futile, no matter how many times you try. Like a mere mortal, attempting to match the craft of a nightmare, or trying to transcend the limits of nature. Megan was just too old to handle Garnak's horn. He lit a cigarette, falling into a heavy silence, a stark contrast to how loud he was before. No longer acting arrogant and boastful, Megan realized Jaehwan hadn't come here looking for him, but rather the manager of the Nightmare Smithy. The last time his manager had stepped foot outside was ages ago, but he was the only one who could help Jaehwan right now. And yet, he had turned out to be so utterly pathetic. Jaehwan didn't really care about that. He told Megan that all he needed was a scabbard, so he should just keep going. But Megan refused. He insisted he had tried enough. Jaehwan disagreed, telling him he could definitely pull it off if he tried 100 million times. Megan chuckled, thinking to himself how typical of the youth. To Jaehwan, it might look like he wasn't putting in the effort, but he had truly given it his all. He had done his absolute best while watching Jaehwan work, whether Jaehwan believed him or not. Megan had mastered every single skill related to blacksmithing and forging. Now, he could confidently say that he could repair any weapon in Nightmare with a 99% success rate. But after reaching that level of success, a different thought hit him. Perhaps he hadn't actually been striving for that 99% success rate, but was simply running away from the 1% chance of failure. Jaehwan stood up, acknowledging that Megan worked harder than anyone else. He then asked him if he knew the underlying principle behind processing skills. Megan replied that he knew Nightmare's processing skill was one of the primordial skills, something that had existed since the beginning of time, just like fire and water. How could a mere human possibly explain the origin of the world? And even if they could, what would be the point of explaining something like that? But Jaehwan argued that Megan was using a skill without actually understanding what he was doing. Hearing this, Megan silently put out his cigarette. According to Jaehwan, the principle involved reinforcing the hammer and chisel with spirit power, then fine-tuning that energy to suppress the horn. Jaehwan pointed to Magan's disciples. If the principle is that simple, then why can't any of them use the processing skill? Magan was stunned. If the logic behind this skill was really that basic, then even if they hadn't officially learned it, they should still be able to do something similar, right? Panic setting in, Megan turned to Jaehwan and asked if he knew the real principle behind processing. Jaehwan didn't know at first, but he had recently figured it out. The moment he touched the horn, its outer shell liquefied, dissolving into a shimmering golden dust. He told the others to take a closer look and tell him what they saw. Megan stared at the separating golden particles. His lifelong, extraordinary efforts had condensed the wall of the world to the absolute limit of what he could perceive. There was nothing wrong with his hard work. If he still couldn't achieve anything after all that effort, then he wasn't the one at fault, the world itself was. It was as if Magan had just realized a profound truth, and his mind drifted back to his days as a young apprentice. He couldn't understand how he had ruined everything. What he was practicing was a technique meant for nightmares, not humans. In truth, there was no technique designed for humans. No matter how hard they tried, a human could never advance past the level of a mere apprentice. Maykal had pushed himself to the absolute limit, trying to break through his human boundaries to reach the level of a nightmare. But it was all in vain. Left in utter despair, he had no idea what to do. Was he supposed to wage war against the entire world? But this was a harsh, unforgiving world. One where you only got results that matched the effort you put in. Is it really so wrong to adapt to this place? Jaehwan asked, attempting to drill some sense back into Maykal's head. This world had lied to the old man, tricking him into believing he couldn't do the very things he was actually capable of. He might be getting old, but he could still fight. Jaehwan urged Maykal, take a closer look at the horn, stop relying on the system, and start looking with your own eyes. Maykal did as he was told, staring deep into the material. Suddenly, he saw a vision of Jaehwan charging forward like a bullet. He couldn't help but wonder. Had Jaehwan always lived his life seeing the world like this? A raw world with no system skills, no status window, a transparent world where there were no exceptions. How could anyone live that way without going completely insane? Gripping the chisel tightly in his hand, Maykal let out a roaring cry and slammed his hammer down. Meanwhile, as Jaehwan stepped out of Twilight's fall, he turned to Mino and asked, "Why are you following me? Up to your old tricks again, are you?" Mino stepped closer, claiming with a half-joke, half-serious smirk that she was planning to kill him. Jaehwan didn't even flinch. Instead, he calmly asked, "And what exactly do you gain by killing me? A life of luxury with all the soul stones I have?" Mino shoved a bundled package into his chest and told him to take it. Inside were a few sets of clothes. She muttered that she didn't like using other people's things for free. Curious, she asked, "If you can't meet the nightmares, what's your next move? Maykal already showed you how to find them, right?" He explained that he would find them to ask about the tree of imagery, so he could find a way to the abyss. Mino simply couldn't comprehend why Jaehwan was going to such extreme lengths. Even if you get lucky and somehow make it to the abyss, she argued, the powerhouses ruling that place won't just stand by. You'll never be able to come back. Jaehwan looked at her coldly and replied, "I have no intention of returning." Mino stood frozen before suddenly flying into a rage. "How can you make such an insane, earth-shattering decision so casually?" she screamed. "What gives you the right to always do whatever you want, without giving a single damn about what anyone else thinks?" Mino let out a torrent of frustration. She couldn't stomach the fact that Jaehwan didn't even view the people in this world as actual human beings. "We're human too," she cried. Maybe we aren't as strong or as brave as you, but we are absolutely human. Jaehwan just stared at her quietly. With his heightened senses, he could read the intense panic and conflict in her mind. Someone was threatening her. He knew she couldn't break her deal, or the hostage would be killed. She was forced to lure him to a specific location. Puzzling it all together, Jaehwan realized what was happening. He could even sense a stalker hiding across the street, watching their every move. But risking his life just to save some random hostage? To him, it felt completely pointless. Even if he saved these people over and over again, nothing would change. The reality right in front of him laid bare the ugly truth of this world. It was a world controlled by those with power and wealth, where people gladly sold their souls just to increase their stats and get a higher payout. Instead of playing along, Jaehwan decided he would hunt down the stalker and continue his search for the nightmares. Frustrated, Mino grabbed him by his collar and screamed, "That is it! You and I are officially done. How could I ever work with a heartless bastard like you?" Angry and hurt, she spun around and walked away, leaving Jaehwan standing there in stunned silence. Watching her walk away, he couldn't help but admit that in that moment, Mino looked very human. Even so, he kept a close eye on the enemies lurking in the shadows. Realizing their trap had failed, the spies would likely retreat to report that the plan to lure Jaehwan out had completely fallen through. After their heated argument, Mino returned to the tavern. But as she pushed open the door, she was greeted by a scene of total chaos, with tables and chairs smashed to pieces. A hostile crowd was waiting inside, holding Claire, the tavern owner, hostage. Standing at the front was Janya, an elder of the Golden Sky clan and the eldest of the Janya brothers. Glaring at Mino, he demanded, "Why are you back here alone? What happened to our deal?" Knowing there was no turning back, Mino summoned her throwing daggers, determined to fight, and launched a volley of blades right at them. But the enemies quickly activated their shadow skills, sending dark, spectral figures charging at her. Mino skillfully leaped and dodged their onslaught, but she couldn't react in time to a lethal slash from the elder himself. Severely wounded, Mino collapsed to the floor. The elder looked down at her with pure disgust. "We set up a soundproofing barrier around this place," he sneered. "No one on the outside has any idea what is happening in here. So stop screaming like an idiot and bring that guy to us." Yanking Claire up by her hair, he growled, "Don't you dare try anything funny, Mino." They knew for a fact that there wasn't a single guard on duty in this part of Gorgon Fortress, so backup was definitely not coming. By the time anyone actually finds you two, you will both be nothing but cold, dry corpses. Refusing to give up, Mino mustered the last of her strength to execute her ultimate skill, the 7 daggers of Akarum, unleashing a final, desperate barrage straight at the elder's face. But with just a single swipe of his sword, the elder easily shattered Mino's blades, beating her to a pulp. In that moment, Jaehwan's question flashed through her mind. If there was a way to return to the past, would you go back? Mino felt completely helpless, ready to accept her death. She wanted to go back. She wanted to live. If she had followed him, would she have witnessed the end of this world? Just as the elder's blade was about to come down on her, a powerful force blocked it. They say the main character always shows up at the last second, and Jaehwan did exactly that, appearing like an absolute god. He tossed the bundle of clothes back to Mino, complaining that none of them fit. Seeing the very target they were looking for, the elder and his men smirked in triumph. "The soul stones are here. This just got a lot easier." Jaehwan pointed his sword directly at them. "Is there a nightmare here? Bring them to me." The others stared at Jaehwan as if he were some kind of alien. Is this guy out of his mind? It seems the rumors about the man who defied the fortress are actually true. Struggling to stand up, Mino warned Jaehwan to be careful, telling him that the elder is a high-level adapter, so he shouldn't underestimate him. Jaehwan didn't even care, because there was no way he would lose. Enraged by his sheer arrogance, the gang didn't waste any more time and charged straight at him. Jaehwan simply thrust his sword forward to test the waters. The elder tilted his head slightly and managed to dodge it. They immediately grew wary. Jaehwan wasn't an adapter, meaning he could be someone wielding the power of the abyss. Jaehwan pondered. Up until now, the only creature that had ever dodged his full power strike was the 5-horned beast. This meant a 4th-stage adapter was on par with that monster. This fight was shaping up to be intense, but he didn't care. Either way, he was going to take them all down. The enemy resorted to dirty tricks, using a hostage to threaten him, shouting, "Come on then, take one step closer." Not caring about her own safety, Claire screamed at them to just go ahead and attack. But before she could finish, one of the thugs slapped her hard across the face. Mino was frantic, begging Claire to hang on, before turning to Jaehwan to plead for him to save her. Holding his ice dragon sword, Jaehwan couldn't understand why Mino was begging him for this. From the very beginning, his only goal here was to find the nightmare, and he would crush anyone who stood in his way. It didn't matter if they were enemies or hostages. Mino grabbed Jaehwan's clothes tightly, crying out, "Please save Claire, she's a human being too." Jaehwan froze, a sudden memory flashing before his eyes. He saw the reflection of Claire screaming with determination, urging him to strike regardless. Gritting his teeth, Jaehwan swung his sword. A massive beam of blue light shot straight into the sky, instantly drawing the attention of the guards. Carlton and Jaehwan broke the barrier. The pub was quickly surrounded, and Carlton stepped inside, asking what was going on. Jaehwan pointed at the elders group, accusing them of breaking the law. He didn't know the exact details, but he guessed they were violating Chapter 276, Section 4 of the Gorgon Criminal Code, or something like that. Jaehwan even turned the tables and pinned the blame on them, claiming they planned to use the pub as a base to conspire with nightmares and destroy the world. Carlton quickly understood the situation. He began reciting a series of laws from Chapter 174, Section 4, and Chapter 124, Section 6 of the Gorgon Criminal Code, citing the unlawful destruction of private property within the fortress and kidnapping residents. The elder and his men were now subject to immediate arrest without a warrant. Realizing things were going south, the elder tried to retreat, but Carlton wasn't about to let him slide. He launched his silver chains, instantly binding the elder's two lackeys. Still refusing to give up, the elder charged directly at Carlton. Carlton pulled out an axe, blocking the incoming blade with such force that it began to crack. The elder jumped back to regain his footing. Just as the old man was about to swing again, Carlton swiftly bound his arms with the silver chains, rendering him helpless as he crashed to the ground and surrendered. But the stubborn old man had one last trick up his sleeve. He threw a hidden object behind Carlton, releasing a sphere that spewed a thick cloud of toxic gas. Taking advantage of the chaos, the three of them bolted out of the pub. Unfortunately, one of them had inhaled the toxic gas and collapsed unconscious. Waiting outside for them was another elder of the Golden Sky clan, the lust demon, Hugh Serlang. He sneered, asking if the Witch of Massacre was really that hard to deal with, demanding they capture her alive and hand her over to him. The elder explained that it wasn't just the Witch of Massacre inside, but there was also another troublesome opponent who used chains. Supporting Mino, Jaehwan kicked open the door. He thrust his sword straight toward the tree where the elders group was hiding. They couldn't believe Jaehwan was completely fine after inhaling that toxic gas. With the lust demon reinforcing the elders group, Jaehwan now had to face three powerful enemies all on his own. Jaehwan slammed the horn into the ground, although he really didn't want to resort to this. Relying on an item's skill was honestly a bit embarrassing for him. But once the horn pierced the ground, it unleashed the terrifying aura of Garnak. The elder and his lackey were paralyzed with fear by the overwhelming pressure. Their bodies went completely limp as they collapsed to the ground. Sensing the immediate danger, the lust demon immediately turned tail and fled, leaving his subordinates to fend for themselves. The elder glared in frustration at his two subordinates lying dead on the ground. Gritting his teeth, he never imagined things would end in such a disaster. Jaehwan stepped right up to the elder. He offered the man a chance to save his own skin, asking him where the nightmare was hiding. The elder gritted his teeth, refusing to say a word. He knew that even if he talked and got out of here alive, it would be pointless. The moment that person found out, his life would be over anyway. Even without a word, Jaehwan could read his every thought. Realizing this, the panicked elder yanked a spirit stone from his robe and bit into it. Under normal circumstances, no one would ever dare eat a spirit stone. Doing so meant corrupting their very soul, and nobody wanted to die a slow, painful death. But the moment he bit down on it, the elder began to mutate. He transformed into a grotesque giant monster covered in writhing tentacles. The mutated beast immediately went on a rampage, tearing into innocent bystanders. Yet, with a shred of consciousness still remaining, the elder could finally see the true reality of the world. What was the point of holding on to dignity in a world like this? What had he even been so afraid of? Finally, he was completely free, powerful, and unstoppable. Why had not he done this sooner? But suddenly, a chill ran down his spine as he felt Jaehwan's intense gaze. Roaring, the elder lunged forward to crush him. He could not tolerate a mere human standing in his presence. Jaehwan, however, simply stood his ground, calmly evaluating the giant beast. Even with his appraisal skill, The beast's identity came up unknown, but Jaehwan did not care anymore. He raised his blade and thrust it straight at the monster's heart. With a swift strike, the monster's head flew off, rolling across the dirt. As the elder's body slowly crumbled into dust, Jaehwan sheathed his sword and walked away. He needed to find a survivor in the ruins of the bar to locate the nightmare. Just then, he saw Mino slumped in a corner, weakly warning him to stay away. Carlton was in no better shape, bleeding out from severe wounds. Mino grabbed a handful of Jaehwan's clothes, crying, "Please, just kill me. While I am still myself." Ominous, dark energy began to creep across her entire body. Jaehwan stood frozen for a second, then gently pulled her into his arms. To him, she was a real human being now. He could not understand why he always hesitated and felt so conflicted whenever he looked at her, or why he could not bring himself to maintain his cold detachment anymore. Jaehwan slowly reached down, gripping his sword hilt. After all, on the brutal path he had chosen to walk, emotions were nothing but a useless weakness. He could not afford to hesitate, but just as he was about to draw his blade, Claire grabbed his hand, urging, "Stop, it is not too late yet, we can still save them." Mino and Carlton were immediately rushed to the medical tent, but the healers could only shake their heads in helplessness. There was absolutely nothing they could do as long as the corruption kept spreading. Suddenly, the fortress's emergency system blared a frantic red alert. A small group of dead men had breached the fortress walls. Panic erupted as citizens fled for their lives, while many fell victim and became corrupted. Transforming into mindless monsters, they began slaughtering everyone in sight. Claire sat quietly beside Mino, speaking softly to Jaehwan, telling him that Mino had mentioned him many times. She remarked how he judged the world purely by his own intuition, all while stubbornly holding on to his humanity. Claire understood people like Jaehwan all too well, having seen his kind before. She noted that humans did not end up in this place out of stupidity. They simply had no other choice. It was not that the people here lacked courage, but what did their courage even accomplish? Noble ideals, fighting for justice. Claire guessed that Jaehwan was the type of person who stubbornly chased after such lofty dreams, but she could not truly comprehend his resolve, simply because she herself lacked that kind of courage. Yet, there was one thing she knew for sure. Jaehwan was too dangerous, and he had to leave. If he stayed, his presence would only give these desperate people a false sense of hope, leading them to even deeper despair. Jaehwan fell silent. He thought of many things. His old comrades who had died, the countless souls who had fallen along the way, and Mino. Nearby, Carlton's condition was rapidly deteriorating. The healers desperately tried grinding down beast horns to purify Carlton's body, but nothing worked. His transformation into a dead man continued completely unchecked. Losing his patience, Jaehwan marched over, grabbed Carlton by the collar, and slapped him twice to force him awake. He had questions that needed answers. Carlton slowly opened his eyes, only to make the exact same plea as Mino. He begged Jaehwan to end his life. Knowing Jaehwan was the only one who could truly end him, Carlton remained stubbornly loyal to his duties, even in his final moments, weakly reciting the special laws of Gorgon. Article 1, Section 4. Any individual who becomes corrupted must be eliminated. Jaehwan's grip tightened on Carlton's collar. Such stubborn, foolish loyalty. Jaehwan thought to himself that if he had just a few loyal men like Carlton back then, he would not have been trapped in that godforsaken tower for 45 years. Suddenly, a sharp system warning echoed in his mind. Soul corruption has reached 94%. The dead man transformation was about to begin. Right at that critical moment, Commander Chung-Hu of the execution squad swept the tent flap open and marched inside. As an S-class adapter, Chung-Hu wasted no time. He drew his massive blade, coldly reciting the laws of Gorgon. Article 1, Section 4. I will now execute Carlton, commander of the northern checkpoint, and the girl, Mino. But as the blade came down, Jaehwan caught it barehanded. Chung-Hu glared at him, warning him to back off so he could deal with Carlton. He is going to turn any second. It will be a complete catastrophe if a fifth-stage adapter turns into a dead man. They were here to prevent that exact nightmare. But to everyone's absolute shock, Jaehwan suddenly pulled out the horn of Garnak. He crushed the legendary horn into a powder and forced it down the throats of Carlton and Mino. But because Mino's body was already so incredibly weak, her transformation began to accelerate rapidly. Her soul's contamination level has already exceeded 95%. The transformation is about to begin, and there is no way to stop her from turning anymore. Just as Jaehwan draws his sword to strike Mino down, Claire stops him. In a panic, she begs them to call for Dr. Chung-hoo, claiming his dead cut can slice away the contamination, but the soldiers hold Claire back. Jaehwan refuses to call the doctor, arguing that the man is currently busy with urgent matters in the inner city and cannot be bothered with such trivial nonsense. Jaehwan warns Jaehwan to get out of the way, declaring that he can no longer back down. Jaehwan's face darkens as he draws his own sword. He tells them he will be the one to end Mino's life, as she was the one who asked him to do it. While Claire continues to scream frantically, Jaehwan points the tip of his blade toward Mino, and a brilliant golden light bursts forth. Suddenly, Jaehwan finds himself standing in a vast, blank white space, where a white-haired old man is sitting right next to Mino. Startled by Jaehwan's sudden appearance, the old man quickly recoils. Jaehwan tries to use his appraisal skill to examine him, but it has no effect whatsoever. Believing this old guy is the root cause of the contamination, Jaehwan thinks Mino might live if he just kills him. Without a second thought, Jaehwan drags his sword forward and charges at the old man. The old man draws his own sword to defend himself, but his blade shatters into pieces. Heartbroken over his broken weapon, he leaps backward out of the space. As it turns out, this old man is none other than Chung-hoo, the Doctor of Despair. Jaehwan is completely shocked to see him there, wondering how on earth the fortress leader could be in this place. Why on earth is he showing up here? Chung-hoo does not care about any of that. With a beautiful lady on the verge of dying right in front of him, he has to save her. Who cares about some stupid fortress? Turning his fury on Jaehwan, Chung-hoo points right at his face and snaps, "You little brat, because of you, my dead cut was completely interrupted." He adds that his dead cut can only be performed with a sword crafted from the horn of a three-horned beast, or something even better. Suddenly, Chung-hoo's eyes land on the sword at Jaehwan's waist. His eyes light up instantly as he begins circling Jaehwan, practically drooling as he inspects the blade. Jaehwan stops the old man and asks him straight out, if he lets him borrow this sword, can he actually save Mino? Chung-hoo replies with absolute confidence, a 10 billion% yes. Without a moment's hesitation, Jaehwan hands his sword over. Chung-hoo shivers with pure joy as he grips it, sensing an incredibly mysterious energy flowing from a blade that feels exactly like its owner. Chung-hoo swings the sword around to test it out, unleashing a brilliant stream of white light. But after only a few swings, the old man runs completely out of breath and collapses to the ground, his soul energy utterly depleted. Gasping for air, Chung-hoo can only watch as the world he created begins to crumble. Powerless to even stand back up, seeing Jaehwan take back his sword, Chung-hoo realizes what he is planning and warns him not to. He tells him there is no way he can copy his fiend slash when he has not even fully entered his unique world yet. Jaehwan grips his sword tightly, replying that he is not trying to draw it, he is simply going to copy it. Chung-hoo tries his best to stop him, but it is no use. Gritting his teeth, Jaehwan holds the sword firmly and begins to carve. This is the very first time he has raised his sword to save a life. In silence, Jaehwan recalls Mino's face, thinking about what a stubborn little clown she always was. Even though she was an assassin, she was incredibly fragile on the inside, remaining fiercely loyal and far too trusting of others. With one final stroke, Jaehwan completes the carving. Mino slowly opens her eyes as her physical rot fades away, and her transformation into a fiend grinds to a halt. Claire rushes over in a panic, weeping tears of relief as she checks on Mino. Jaehwan, however, remains completely silent and expressionless. Chung-hoo gives him a nod of approval, noting that his narrow perspective seems to have broadened a bit. "You've gone from a 5-year-old's mindset to a 10-year-old's, the old man teases. He is amazed that Jaehwan can perform the fiend slash, as it is not a skill just any adapter can copy. Given the circumstances, he realizes Jaehwan might actually be an awakener. Awakeners are anomalous beings who can bypass the system's rules. They are a rare breed of humans who obtain overwhelming, miraculous power by completely rejecting adaptation. An awakener possesses the kind of raw power that could completely rewrite the balance of power in chaos. Even across the entire Great Lands, only a select few are ever deemed true awakeners." Hearing this, Jaehwan suddenly panics. He remembers Chung-hoo mentioning before that if someone else could use the fiend slash, they might actually be able to save the fortress master. Just then, a figure clad entirely in black steps into the tent. It is the captain of the Dark Guard. He is a level 5 adapter known as the Dark Captain. Walking past everyone else, he stops right in front of Jaehwan and kneels respectfully, greeting him as the special envoy of the blue pyrite flower. He invites Jaehwan inside the castle, escorting him to meet the fortress commander, urine. Once they meet, they exchange brief introductions before getting straight to business. The commander asks Jaehwan directly if he is indeed the special envoy of the blue pyrite flower, but Jaehwan denies it without blinking an eye. Chung-hoo then chimes in, asking why Jaehwan is carrying the soul stone. They are proof of membership in the blue pyrite flower guild. If he is not one of them, how on earth did he get his hands on it, let alone use it without sustaining any soul damage? Jaehwan calmly explains that he simply picked it up, adding that its previous owners are dead because he was the one who killed them. Jaehwan leaps to his feet in disbelief, exclaiming, "Who would dare harm a member of the 6 great guilds?" Jaehwan explains that those pests picked a fight with him first to steal his horn, so he simply beat them down. The fortress master finally puts the pieces together. The blue pyrite flower is notoriously greedy for resources, so it makes perfect sense that a fight broke out. He then asks Jaehwan to tell him more about what happened after his arrival in Chaos. After a quick heart-to-heart, the commander set down his teacup. Jaehwan had coincidentally stumbled into whatever brought him to Chaos, and just happened to get his hands on a magic stone from the Greenleaf clan to enter the fortress. Then, by sheer luck, he got caught up in a riot and ran into Chung-hoo. Right after that, he actually pulled off the doctor's fiend slash after only seeing it once. Chung-hoo couldn't believe the fortress commander was actually buying Jaehwan's story. Did the guy lose his mind after the Castellan vanished? The commander just smiled, ignoring Chung-hoo's comment. He turned to Jaehwan and asked, "Your physical body. It's still alive, isn't it?" Jaehwan paused. He hadn't participated in the main game, opting to break out of the nightmare instead. He was currently in a spirit state, since the Tree of Illusion had mistaken him for a messenger and sent him to Chaos. If it were his real body, it would definitely still be breathing oxygen back on Earth. Jaehwan countered, asking how the commander knew he wasn't dead yet. Based on Jaehwan's story, he figured the guy was still alive, because nobody would talk about their own death so casually. Jaehwan obviously had his reasons for keeping quiet, so he didn't confirm or deny anything. Since Jaehwan was keeping quiet, the commander tapped his fingers on the table and admitted he had a confession to make. For the past 4 days, his men had been keeping tabs on Jaehwan, though he figured the kid already knew that. Even the guy on the roof Jaehwan had threatened earlier was one of his subordinates. Jaehwan was way stronger than expected, making him almost impossible to tail. Still, the stakeout wasn't a total waste. The commander projected the file they'd gathered on Jaehwan over the last few days. It rated him as a SS rank threat with unmeasurable combat power, and estimated financial damages at roughly 380 million. Hearing that, even Chung-hoo couldn't help but gasp, calling him a total psycho. He wasn't sure if Jaehwan was a hero or a criminal, but he was definitely not human. Jurgen burst out laughing, saying some would call Jaehwan a hero, while others would call him a lunatic, and that everyone would have a different name for him. But as for Jurgen himself, he preferred to call people like Jaehwan the main character. Main character? Jaehwan was completely lost, wondering if this was some webtoon with main and supporting roles. Usually, main characters are super famous, but Jaehwan was completely under the radar. That meant some shadow organization was actively covering up any information about him. And they definitely weren't friendly, because if they were pulling the strings from the shadows, he wouldn't have struggled so much just to get a basic ID card. Jurgen figured Jaehwan was a true protagonist, running away to Chaos to escape some powerful organization. Jaehwan fell silent, pondering who was really pulling his strings. It might be the Lord of Darkness, one of the 12 lords of the Great Lands. He had no idea just how powerful these so-called lords actually were. Jurgen promised he wouldn't pry into Jaehwan's identity, and they wouldn't hold him responsible for any of the damage he had caused. In fact, Gorgon Fortress would protect him. Jaehwan cut to the chase, asking if the fortress actually had the muscle to stand up against the 12 lords of the Great Lands. Jurgen got the hint immediately and confidently assured him that they could. The lords weren't allowed to directly interfere with anything going on in Chaos anyway. Gorgon would do whatever it took to back Jaehwan, but in exchange, he had to help them save the Castellan. 2 hours later, Jaehwan was led down to the training grounds by the captain of the Black Guard. While Mino and Carlton were busy recovering in the infirmary, the rest of them headed straight down to the training grounds. Chung-hoo was dying to find out whose attack was stronger, Jaehwan's thrust or his own slash. Chung-hoo proposed a deal. If Jaehwan could beat him, he'd answer any question he had. He was insanely confident that losing was absolutely out of the question. But after trading blows for a bit, Chung-hoo ended up getting face-planted straight into the dirt. Refusing to accept it, the old man demanded a rematch. Jaehwan just sighed and told him the winner was already obvious, so they should just call it a day. But Chung-hoo was too stubborn to back down, insisting he hadn't even used his ultimate technique yet. He claimed that if he actually unleashed it, Jaehwan would be a goner, and that he was just holding back. Jaehwan was totally speechless, wondering how many times the old man was going to repeat that. Yelling from the bottom of the crater, Chung-hoo asked Jaehwan how old he was. Jaehwan guessed he was around 60 years old. Chung-hoo lost his mind and screamed back that he was actually over 1,000 years old. There was no way some punk who had only been practicing thrusts for 65 years could beat a master who had been slashing for 1,000 years. But even though Chung-hoo had 1,000 years of practice under his belt, to Jaehwan, his skills looked like he'd only been doing it for 15. With his pride completely shattered, Chung-hoo leaped out of the crater, swinging his sword for another strike. Jaehwan raised his own blade to parry, and as their weapons clashed in a flurry of strikes, Jaehwan was actually forced back a few steps. Impressed by the technique, Chung-hoo eagerly asked what it was called. Jaehwan just gave him a deadpan look and replied, "Just a normal thrust." Chung-hoo was completely speechless. With a generic name like that, who would ever guess it was an insanely overpowered move? Jaehwan grips his sword tightly, bracing himself to deliver an even more powerful stab. Chung-hoo can only stare, completely frozen. Right now, the person standing before him isn't just the ordinary Jaehwan, it's the absolute soul king of chaos. He could never forget the sheer terror of facing this king. Chung-hoo breaks out in a cold sweat. He doesn't think he could ever deflect a strike like that. Even if it's not quite on the level of the Soul King, it's still a devastatingly powerful attack. As Jaehwan crouches to build momentum and spring forward, Chung-hoo suddenly steps in to stop him. Meanwhile, in the 5th region of the Great Lands, the Steel region, the unbreakable Lord of Steel, Hu listens to his subordinate's report about the Sovereign of Darkness moving around in chaos. Hu frowns. Aren't all the lords of the Great Lands bound by a covenant that strictly forbids them from interfering in chaos? Feeling the immense pressure, the subordinate quickly bows his head. Hu looks at the monitor, which shows a video of a certain young man clearing the 99th floor all by himself. Hu is deeply confused. Isn't this footage supposed to be a fake? Yet, the item shown in the video is none other than the artifact linked directly to the Sovereign of Darkness of the 9th region. After refusing to complete the tutorial mode, the guy in the video broke right through the top of the tower and carried that very artifact away with him. And since then, he has completely vanished. You can't believe it wasn't there a demon guarding the 100th floor? But that demon is dead. On top of that, Hu just received intel that the Sovereign of Darkness has actually been interfering with chaos for a very long time. In fact, one of the 10 sects of chaos has been in constant contact with the Sovereign of Darkness. Hu ponders this for a moment before ordering his subordinate to send a message to Chaos, summoning 10 elite Rank 1 Golden Sky Warriors and 20 Stage 5 adapters. He wants to personally head down and see what's going on. But thinking of Chaos makes Hu worry about his old friend, Chung-hoo. That old man could have lived a long, peaceful life if he wasn't so incredibly blunt. You can only hope Chung-hoo is doing okay. Meanwhile, Chung-hoo is being run ragged by Jaehwan, feeling like he's about to kick the bucket any second. He still can't accept it. How on earth could Jaehwan pull off something like this after only a few dozen stabs? Over 45 years, Jaehwan calculates that he has executed that exact move about 10 billion times. Chung-hoo refuses to believe it. To do that, you'd have to skip eating and sleeping entirely, stabbing 8 times every single second. Who could possibly do that? But Jaehwan simply replies, "I can stab 100 times a second. And who said that motion can only be done with a sword?" Chung-hoo's eyes widen as a sudden realization hits him. That sharp, foreign energy he felt when he first met Jaehwan wasn't actually energy at all, nor was it anything like fighting spirit. It was pure, killing intent and a burning ambition to cleanse the entire world. This is the ultimate thrust. Finally, Chung-hoo understands. Jaehwan has literally turned himself into the thrust, and he's still stabbing through this world even at this very moment. Jaehwan stands up. He wasn't exaggerating, he really has executed that thrust 10 billion times. Jaehwan holds up a piece of paper right in front of Chung-hoo's face and asks if he still remembers it. It's the contract they signed before their duel, stating that the loser must grant any single wish of the winner. Jaehwan's request is simple. Answer his questions honestly. With that settled, the two of them step out of the training hall. Jaehwan asks him, "What exactly is the Master's Tower?" Chung-hoo hesitates for a second, then explains as they walk that the things creating the towers are nightmares, and they are ranked from F to S tier. Masters are those who manage to build an S-tier tower during their apprenticeship, becoming master artisans at a very young age. But just because a master builds a tower doesn't automatically make it a master's tower. Only very special towers built entirely without the use of seeds can earn that title. No one knows why the towers are built in the first place, and nobody in this world has any idea what the hell those masters are thinking. Everyone says the masters are the ones pulling the strings behind the reality of the world, but one thing is certain. Every now and then, an awakener emerges from those who manage to clear a master's tower. Chung-Hu himself cleared one of those master's towers. He cleared the 4th tower of Master Melville, known to the world as Moby Dick. A giant white whale spawned right on the 1st floor, relentlessly hunting down humans. Looking back, the difficulty of that tower might sound like a joke today, but back then, it was an absolute nightmare for Chung-Hu. Countless martial artists from the Murim world lost their lives there. For him to actually clear it was nothing short of a miracle. Chung-Hu guesses that Jaehwan must have come from a master's tower too, so he asks who built it. Jaehwan mentions Mulak. Upon hearing the name, Chung-Hu freezes in sheer disbelief. He never imagined an awakener could actually conquer Mulak's tower. Chung-Hu knew Mulak personally, having traveled with him in the past. The two continue their walk, heading far out of town until they reach Kasha's tavern. Staring at the meat skewer on his plate, Jaehwan fell silent. Chung-Hu could read his thoughts. How could food even exist in a world where no one ever feels hungry? Chung-Hu took a long gulp of his beer, staring down into his glass. Chaos was actually once a world of blessings. A place where souls weary from the wars in the Great Lands could find sweet rest. A place where they could reclaim their lives. Freed from their past lives, warriors could finally lay down their weapons, and singers could sing of peace instead of war. Suddenly, a commotion broke out nearby. Jaehwan glanced over, realizing it was just a drunken brawl. Deciding it was none of his business, he looked down and took another sip. It tasted just like water. In chaos, people don't get drunk, they don't starve, and they don't age. They were all just pretending to be drunk. But in a paradise like this, people started wishing for the exact opposite. They missed a reality that included death, so they started acting as if they were actually living a real life. A life where they would die if they didn't eat, and get drunk if they drank. A life with real bodies and beating hearts. Just as the mood grew heavy, Chung-Hu suddenly shouted. One day, those drunks started doing something new. An expedition team formed, dreaming of the impossible, gathering people to find a way back to a real life. That was the Abyss expedition. Jaehwan didn't understand. With so many places, why would they choose the Abyss? Chung-Hu slumped into his seat, explaining that they wanted to find the fruit of resurrection. A fruit that grows on the branches of the tree of illusion at the very end of the Abyss. The only way for those who died in this world to come back to life is by eating that fruit of resurrection. The Abyss expedition was an alliance formed specifically to find that fruit. At that time, Chung-Hu had already awakened. He was at that fearless age, only 150 years old. Mulak was also a member of that expedition. He was the captain leading the expedition, a truly extraordinary individual. Chung-Hu recalled his conversation with Mulak. The two of them had even traded blows. Mulak was a nightmare. He shouldn't have had any emotions, yet he felt deep regret for creating those towers. The reason Mulak sought the Tree of Illusion and ventured into the Abyss was because of a certain tower, a tower that would end all cultivation. That was why he joined the expedition. Chung-Hu didn't know what happened to the expedition after that, as he fell behind and only made it to the entrance of the Abyss. But Mulak actually reached the very top of the Tree of Illusion, and when the fruit began to fall from the branches, every single member of the expedition was able to return to chaos with their hands full. Jaehwan suddenly felt something was off. If old Chung-Hu had gotten his hands on the fruit of resurrection, why was he still here in chaos? Just then, Claire walked over carrying some food. She scolded Chung-Hu for telling the story all wrong. The expedition was a failure. They only succeeded in gathering the fruit. Chung-Hu explained somberly that when they returned to chaos, the kings and clan leaders of the Great Lands were already waiting for them at the exit. Since they lacked the courage to venture into the Abyss themselves, those cowards waited. The 4 fortress lords and 10 high priests of the expedition fought back, but they were simply no match for those bastards. There was a massive gap in power. The kings and clan leaders were on a completely different level. So, all their fruits were stolen. Those scumbags used the stolen fruits to resurrect themselves every single time they died. They've been doing this for 900 years now. It's as if they have a special place built just for them, known as the Recovery Palace. The kings and the 5 great clans take turns resurrecting when they die. From the very beginning, who gets to live has already been decided. They're the only ones who can live a normal life. Jaehwan blinked, suddenly putting all the pieces together. That's why the people here are so indifferent. They all know that the real life they crave, and the fruit of resurrection, are things they will never, ever get to have. Jaehwan was about to ask more, only to find Chunghu slumped over the table, fast asleep. After faking drunkenness for 1,000 years, he'd finally passed out for real, without even realizing it. Claire continued, sharing what she had heard after the expedition ended. No one had ever seen Mulak again. Before vanishing, he supposedly said something along the lines of failing, but not truly failing. Right then, a visitor arrived. It was James. He came to thank Jaehwan for saving Carlton. Jaehwan just stared blankly, completely unable to recall who this guy even was. James sighed and told him that if he ever visited Gorgon again, he should use the North Gate. Since he already knew his face, he wouldn't bother checking his papers. Of course, this had to be kept a secret from Carlton. James chuckled mischievously. After sitting there for a bit, Captain Zahir rushed in, his face pale as he delivered some news. Something big has happened. Jaehwan slung Chunghu over his shoulder and dashed off with Zahir. As he watched black smoke rising from the fortress, he could already guess what was happening. The master of the fortress had likely degenerated into nothing more than a dead man. The aura pressure was 10 times stronger than any of the other dead men he had encountered earlier that day. Deep beneath the fortress, right in its dark underbelly, Jaehwan could feel a strange presence as he recalled the desperate plea of Jurin, the fortress commander. The old man had begged him to save the master of this fortress, but Jaehwan quickly realized that the master's corruption was spiraling out of control, triggering a sudden, violent outburst. Normally, this would only happen once a week, but today was different, and Carlton warned Jaehwan about the situation to avoid any misunderstanding. The master was actually a good man, and before he began fighting this terrible corruption, he was a living legend. After all, he was one of the legendary warriors who fought alongside the divine physician Chunghu during their expedition into the abyss. Carlton told Jaehwan that since Chunghu was currently fast asleep, Jaehwan would have to perform the dead man slash in his place. Jaehwan hesitated, since he had only been copying Chunghu's moves, and his own dead man slash was nowhere near as refined as the old man's. Things would have been different if he'd been properly trained by Chunghu himself, and meanwhile, the thick black smoke pouring from the castle only grew more intense. Just then, the commanders of the Fallen Tower and the Tower of Despair blocked their path, acting on strict orders to let absolutely no one inside. To them, the only will that mattered was that of the Sky Prohibition cult, not the corrupt master rotting inside. The commanders of the Fallen Tower and the Tower of Despair lunged from above, and Carlton quickly shoved Jaehwan aside, yelling at him to get out of the way. Carlton then took on both of them alone, while Jaehwan watched calmly, muttering that the guy was actually pretty good. Blocking a sword with one hand and a hammer with the other, Carlton gritted his teeth, never expecting the Sky Prohibition cult to have moles inside the fortress. Pushing them both back with a heavy swing, Carlton warned them to think carefully, saying that if they backed down now, the fortress master would surely show them mercy. The commander of the Tower of Despair sneered, asking what kind of master rots underground, claiming the man couldn't even control his own power. He argued that the master couldn't even tell good from evil anymore, and that was not the kind of paradise they swore to serve. He spat at Carlton, asking how he could still serve that thing after seeing what it had become with his own eyes. But Carlton held on to his faith, believing the master would return, and seeing they wouldn't back down, the commander of the Fallen Tower seized a split-second opening to swing his massive hammer at Carlton from behind. Carlton couldn't dodge in time, and was sent flying 8 meters away, his hair in a mess and his clothes shredded as he violently coughed up white fluid. These two were only level 4 adapters, so in theory, there was absolutely no way they should be able to defeat a level 5 adapter. Even if they were ganging up on him, how could they possibly pull this off? He couldn't even track their speed anymore, realizing this wasn't just some regular power boost. Something was extremely dangerous here, and Carlton was about to scream at Jaehwan to run, but before he could, Jaehwan tossed the sleeping Chunghu right into his face. Declaring he would handle this, Jaehwan stepped forward as the commander of the Fallen Tower stared him down, demanding to know if he could actually perform the dead man slash. Jaehwan didn't say yes or no, while the two commanders exchanged silent telepathic glances, warily sizing him up. From the looks of it, he didn't look like an adapter at all, and they wondered if this kid was just bluffing about trying to pull off the dead man slash with a trashy sword like that. Jaehwan's build was barely half the size of the fallen tower's commander, looking like he'd snap in half with just a single push before he could even blink. Little did they know, Jaehwan heard every single word of their quiet whispers, and in the blink of an eye, he vanished and reappeared right behind the fallen tower's commander, delivering a brutal punch that completely shattered his jaw. Before the commander could even make a sound, he was sent flying through the air, smashing a massive hole right through the wall. Seeing his comrade get pulverized, the commander of the Tower of Despair rushed in to attack, but Jaehwan absolutely thrashed him. With his armor shattered into pieces, the commander of the Tower of Despair desperately tried to steady his feet to keep from collapsing. He swung his spear wildly at Jaehwan, but the young man easily slipped past, prompting the desperate commander to execute a relentless, spinning spear technique in a barrage of strikes. Backstepping to dodge the flurry, Jaehwan could feel that same overwhelming, dark energy surging once again. Was it a heart consumed by pure hatred, or what? The commander of the Tower of Despair growled, asking if a nobody like him really thought he could save the fortress master. But underneath all that anger, Jaehwan could feel sheer, raw terror. To think these pathetic weaklings actually planned a betrayal with this level of power was honestly laughable. Jaehwan replied that he never said he was going to save the master, since that was the old man's job over there. But taking out two weaklings like them was child's play, and with that, Jaehwan stomped down on the spear, launched himself into the air, and brought his sword crashing down. Meanwhile, Jaehwan, the fortress commander, rushed down to the basement with his men to assess the situation. He gulped hard, realizing it hadn't even been a full day since the divine physician used his ghoul slash on the master. Yet things had already gotten this bad. Even though Jaehwan had checked on him earlier that morning and saw his transition into a dead man had stabilized along with his energy. So why on earth was he going completely berserk now? Just when they finally had a glimmer of hope that the master could be cured, this nightmare had to happen. If they could have just held out for another month, they might have actually saved him. But right now, Jaehwan's ghoul slash was just an imitation, and unlike Mino, the master's mental collapse was far too severe. Any ordinary person would have fully transformed into a dead man long ago, but with another month of training, Jaehwan's ghoul slash would have been fully ready. Jaehwan gritted his teeth, looking back at the subordinates standing behind him. One of these people must know about Jaehwan. He had already figured out there was a traitor lurking among them. Previously, the castle lord set out to inspect the troops, hoping to find someone capable of manipulating spirit corruption. But by the time he returned, his soul was already corrupted. He was a shell of his former self, looking like a total monster. And one of the people who witnessed that tragedy is right here, Manhwa. Deep down, Jaehwan started having doubts about him. Meanwhile, Manhwa was demanding everyone stay on high alert, claiming it was an absolute emergency. If they delayed any longer, it would be the end of Gorgon. Jaehwan was stunned. They couldn't perform the ghoul slash without the doctor here. Did they seriously want the castle lord to lose his life? Manhwa knew that even if they all fought together, they wouldn't stand a chance against the castle lord. So, he decided to cast the ghoul seal. If they keep waiting, it'll be too late. At the very least, they had to protect the castle lord's spirit energy through the ghoul seal. Manhwa stared down Jaehwan, pressuring him to make a decision. Just then, the captain of the Dark Squad stepped inside, holding a mysterious box. Jaehwan froze. He couldn't believe the Dark Squad captain, a member of the command staff, was the traitor. And the box he was holding, it contained Jaehwan's dark crystal. Manhwa immediately confronted Jaehwan, demanding to know why he was hiding and hoarding such a crucial item when it was the very future of Gorgon. Pressing his advantage, Manhwa aggressively accused Jaehwan, asking if his goal was to turn the castle lord into a greater ghoul. Even a single mid-level ghoul was already a catastrophic threat to Gorgon. A greater ghoul is a calamity that commands countless lesser ghouls, bringing absolute destruction wherever it sweeps through. Jaehwan clenched his fists in sheer frustration, unable to say a word. The castle lord was losing his mind, and the doctor wasn't even here. Manhwa's logic was hard to argue with, but Jaehwan still felt a lingering sense of unease. Performing the ghoul slash wasn't something just anyone could pull off, even with a dark crystal. The ghoul seal is a secret technique of the Green Pieris clan. Was Manhwa planning to bring one of their members here? Manhwa told Jaehwan not to worry. He had already summoned people who had mastered that secret technique. They weren't from the Green Pieris clan, but they could at least cast the seal. Jaehwan watched as a line of cloaked figures entered. This was bad. They were completely doomed. If the ghoul seal was executed this way, the castle lord's spirit energy would be sealed inside the dark crystal. In chaos, energy couldn't be inherited. So, if someone could get their hands on a dark crystal containing the Castle Lord's spirit energy, they would possess his incredible spirit energy and become the new master of Gorgon. Cold sweat poured down Jurin's face. If Gorgon fell into the wrong hands, they were history. Jurin watched as the cloaked figure pulled the dark crystal from the box. He couldn't believe someone outside of the Green Pieris clan and other than Jaehwan could actually handle a dark crystal. Jurin suddenly recalled the Castle Lord's past words, and his face went pale. The person who could manipulate spirit corruption had finally appeared. The Castle Lord's corruption starting half a year ago, up to his madness today, was it all part of Outer Commander Maihan's plan? Panicking, Jurin frantically ordered his subordinates to stop Maihan, but no one listened. In utter despair, Jurin fell to his knees. Every single one of them had betrayed him. He was completely powerless. He felt incredibly guilty toward the Castle Lord. His own complacency had cost them, Gorgon. Tears streamed down Jurin's face as he sat there, completely helpless. Suddenly, the ceiling caved in, scattering the crowd below. Jaehwan and Zahir made a legendary entrance, jumping down from above. The Dark Army commander clicked his tongue. Maihan screamed, asking who the hell Jaehwan was and how he dared to barge in here. Zahir tossed the two commanders of the Tower of the Fallen and the Tower of Despair to the ground, shouting for Maihan to stop. Treason is a capital offense. Maihan glared at the commander of the Tower of the Fallen. Instantly, the man's face distorted before his entire head exploded. Maihan smirked with absolute confidence. Now that the evidence was blown to pieces, he had absolutely nothing to fear. Boiling with rage, Zahir ordered his men to draw their weapons and fight. This was an outright rebellion. If the Ghoul Seal went through, everything Maihan planned would become a reality. But before Zahir could take a step, his own subordinates drew their swords on him. They had already joined the Golden Sky sect, warning Zahir to stay put until the Castle Lord's seal was complete. Zahir roared, "You traitorous cowards!" Meanwhile, Jaehwan calmly assessed the situation and began negotiating with Jurin. As per their deal, he would save the Castle Lord, but only if Gorgon Fortress agreed to protect him. But now, Gorgon has broken its promise to him. This place can't protect him anymore. That's why the terms of the deal have to change. Jaehwan boldly declares that he will save the Castle Lord and slaughter every single traitor on the opposing side. In return, they must hand over Dr. St. Chunghu to him, and he will launch a brand new campaign to conquer the Abyss. Everyone standing here will help him achieve it. Hearing this, the crowd is absolutely stunned, while Maihan finds it completely laughable. He had heard rumors about someone taking down Janya, a dead man, in a single blow. He just assumed it was a massive lie. But now it seems to be the truth. In that case, he will have to go all out to put Jaehwan down. Maihan orders his lackeys to gang up on him, surrounding Jaehwan from all sides. But out of nowhere, Jaehwan goes full-on ninja mode. Straight out of the Hidden Leaf village, he pulls out throwing daggers and starts firing them, left and right. With his elite skills, his throwing daggers fly like rockets, completely tearing the enemy's formation apart. The aggressive thugs leading the charge get struck by the daggers, instantly getting sent to the disabled list. Still, the rest of them keep rushing forward. Jaehwan notices these guys are relentlessly coming at him. He sighs, thinking, why are these fools so eager to kiss the dirt? Jaehwan then unleashes his signature normal thrust directly at Maihan. Maihan tries to block it with his sword, but he completely miscalculates. There is no way he can stop that attack. Maihan is forced to deflect the blow, sending it crashing into the wall right next to the Castle Lord. He breaks out in a cold sweat. If he had been stubborn enough to try and block it head-on, he would be pushing up daisies by now. Meanwhile, the others start using telepathy to discuss their next move. If they can't keep the dead man sealed, they will have no choice but to execute Plan B. They will have to use the Black Cloud, even if it means slaughtering everyone in Gorgon. Jaehwan hears everything, and his face darkens. He points directly at Maihan, startling him. Jaehwan knows exactly who he is, the Outer Fortress manager of Gorgon and the first elder of the Golden Sky clan. He doesn't know why they want to make spirits collapse, but Jaehwan knows one thing for sure. He really likes people like this, because with people like them around, it makes it so much easier for him to destroy this world. Jaehwan raises his sword, a massive aura surging from his body. Maihan and his lackeys can sense the terrifying power of his move. They quickly form a defensive line, doing everything they can to block Jaehwan. Jaehwan points his sword straight toward the sky. A blinding light forms above, raining down devastating attacks everywhere. Maihan's group gets absolutely pulverized. For Jurin, it is like seeing a ray of hope. He remembers the words of the Castle Lord. The people of Gorgon need hope, a magnificent hope that will never waver, no matter what they face. Yurin can't believe that he is feeling that very hope the Castle Lord spoke of, coming from a guy who literally talks about destroying the world like Jaehwan. Maihan gets sliced clean in half like Gojo. Breathing his last breath before meeting his maker, he still finds the strength to curse Jaehwan as a monster. Jaehwan thrusts his sword straight into his face, making him vanish instantly. Right at that moment, Kamen arrives. Chunghu is still sleeping like a log, showing no signs of waking up. Jaehwan grabs him and throws him hard against the wall. Chunghu screams in agonizing pain, his already crippled back now completely ruined. Suddenly, the system blares a red alert. The target's spirit corruption has exceeded 99.9%. Dead man transformation has begun. The system begins calculating the target's danger level. After failing to determine the exact level, the system predicts a highly dangerous dead man. The automatic warning system of Gorgon Fortress is now activated. Tremors begin to shake the entire Gorgon Fortress. Citizens panic and run in all directions, while soldiers quickly evacuate everyone to safety. A massive surge of dark energy erupts inside the fortress, prompting Chunghu to get completely serious. He tells Yurin and Kamen to head to the evacuation zone immediately, leaving him and Jaehwan to handle things here. The two nod and quickly depart. Chunghu draws his sword. He just pocketed a brand new blade from somewhere, and now is the perfect time to use it. Without hesitation, Chunghu starts drawing in the air. The Castle Lord was an incredibly important friend to him. They shared so many wonderful memories together. As Chunghu performs the technique, he explains it so Jaehwan can understand it deeply. Forgotten memories are the core of the dead man slash. If their minds are filled with memories, they can at least survive the worst-case scenario. While Chunghu is drawing, he notices a group of dark, shadowy figures appearing behind the Castle Lord. They cackle, staring at Chunghu with terrifying eyes. Chunghu begins to tremble. That is not the Castle Lord. Something absolutely horrifying is coming. The Castle Lord opens his eyes, shatters his chains, and floats into the air. His eyes are completely hollow, and his body is extremely gaunt, reduced to nothing but skin and bones. Chunghu trembles. This is definitely not the Castle Lord he used to know. The moment the Castle Lord steps onto the ground, a cold shiver runs down both Jaehwan's and Chunghu's spines, as a primal feeling of dread washes over them. The dark shadow behind the Castle Lord stares intently at the two of them, and mutters, "How surprising. I never thought I would be able to enter this world using this body." In the end, even this man has turned into a dead man. The dark figure laughs savagely and asks Chunghu why he is still in chaos. Didn't he find what he wanted in the abyss 9 years ago? Chunghu recognizes the voice, breaking out into a cold sweat. This is the master of the Palace of Death, located at the center of chaos, and the only one who can open the gate to the abyss. Soul King Catastrophe. Jaehwan cannot identify the dark figure even with his doubt skill. This thing is similar to a dead man, but not quite. What exactly is it? He has no idea. With a wave of his hand, the master of the Palace of Death unleashes an overwhelming pressure, making it hard for the two of them to even stand. He repeatedly questions Chunghu, demanding to know why he is still here. Is he actually trying to protect this world? Chunghu collapses to the ground. With just a snap of his fingers, the enemy shattered the barrier he had spent so much effort setting up. Cackling, the master of the Palace of Death looks over at Jaehwan and remarks, "What an interesting young man. A human who has fully awakened, yet still possesses a pure heart." Chunghu freezes, completely unable to stand. The master of the Palace of Death has the power of possession. He must have taken over the fortress master's body through body snatching. If that is the case, then what stands before him now is merely a clone. It is unbelievable that a mere clone could exert such terrifying pressure. Knowing Chunghu cannot get back up, Jaehwan steps up. But to the master of the Palace of Death, this is nothing but a joke. He glares at Jaehwan with a provocative look. Chunghu desperately tugs on Jaehwan's shirt to stop him, warning him that he stands no chance in this state. Even Mulak could not lay a finger on Soul King Catastrophe. But Jaehwan cuts him off and tells Chunghu not to worry. He is absolutely certain he can take this guy down. The master of the Palace of Death, Soul King Catastrophe, bursts into a maniacal laugh. He hawks up a mass of black threads from his throat. Gripping them, he pulls them out into a sword, ready for battle. Chunghu immediately recognizes the blade. It is the Void Sword, the terrifying weapon that instantly turned half of the expedition team into dead men. He cannot believe this trump card is actually being brought out. Gripping his sword, Soul King Catastrophe lunges at Jaehwan. Jaehwan leaps back to dodge. Catastrophe remarks that he has seen those eyes of Jaehwan's before. Long ago, he knew of someone else who wanted to go to the abyss. This fills him with pure excitement. So there is still someone left in this world who wants to reach the very end of it. With that, Soul King Catastrophe grabs Jaehwan's head with one hand. As the king swings his sword down, Jaehwan flips to dodge and strikes back, shattering Catastrophe's arm in two. Jaehwan then retreats to maintain his distance. He rubs his face where he was just grabbed. He thought he had severed Catastrophe's arm, but in less than 3 seconds, that same arm lunges again to grab him. Fortunately, his quick reflexes save him just in time, but a graze on his bicep still tears away a chunk of flesh. Jaehwan grips his sword tightly, spinning around to counterattack. He slices the Soul King clean in half, yet it does not faze him at all. His severed upper body floats in midair before slowly sewing itself back together. Propping his sword against the ground, Catastrophe begins to lecture him once more. Corruption, at its core, is a disease of time. With just a single scratch from the Void Sword, thousands of years will pass by. A soul unable to withstand the passage of time will age, corrupt, and ultimately turn into a dead man. As the wound on his arm rapidly rots and decays, Jaehwan does not hesitate. He swings his sword and chops off his own arm. Soul King Catastrophe lets out a surprised gasp. He never expected Jaehwan to so casually and easily sever his corrupted soul. A strong will, but that alone will not save you. With that, he coughs up another batch of swords. Multiple blades sprout from his body and shoot toward Jaehwan. Noticing them flying toward Chungher, Jaehwan steps in front of him to deflect the incoming barrage, but 2 swords manage to pierce his remaining arm and leg. Without a moment's hesitation, he pulls the blades out and chops away the rotting flesh from his arm and leg. Soul King Catastrophe lunges forward to attack again, and Jaehwan raises his sword to block. The sheer impact of the clash sends Chungher tumbling far away. If the fight continues like this, Jaehwan will not be able to hold out much longer. No matter how many times he uses doubt, he still cannot find his opponent's weakness, and those strange yellow objects with strange characters keep flashing before his eyes, disrupting his focus. Jaehwan recalls Chungher's previous words. Every awakener possesses a unique world. This world is created using a single keyword they receive when they awaken something akin to a desire or an emotion. A powerful awakener can bring countless creatures into their own world. Gripping his sword tight, Jaehwan decides to gamble one more time. He parries Catastrophe's sword and takes a step back. Jaehwan activates his moon's eye, and the surrounding space shifts into a blazing, crimson red. This is true hell. He has always lived in a world like this, an underworld forged from helplessness and wrath. A blood-red eye manifests in the sky, glaring down at Soul King Catastrophe. The old king is truly impressed. It is his first time witnessing a human's ideal world. Just as he is about to open his mouth to cough up more weapons, Jaehwan blitzes forward at extreme speed, shattering the old man's mouth. In response, Soul King Catastrophe unleashes a mass of vines. Binding Jaehwan, the old monster shoved his face close and stuck out his tongue. Jaehwan could only keep charging forward, desperately searching for a way to end this once and for all. Soul King Catastrophe grabbed Jaehwan by the face and slammed him hard into the ground. The ground shattered, triggering a massive landslide. Soul King Catastrophe stepped heavily onto Jaehwan's chest as he lay motionless. It had been a long time since the monster had met someone who clung to hatred as fiercely as Jaehwan. Drawing another void sword from his body, he aimed it at Jaehwan, preparing to drive it down. But just as the blade was about to pierce him, Jaehwan suddenly snapped his eyes open. With a single, powerful swing, Jaehwan sliced Soul King Catastrophe clean in half. The old monster's eyes widened in sheer shock, completely clueless as to what had just happened. Jaehwan threw off his coat. His real fun was just getting started. Even as Soul King Catastrophe's bisected body parts rolled on the ground, the monster remained insanely confident that Jaehwan couldn't truly harm him. He began stitching his body back together, turning into an even more colossal giant than before. Soul King Catastrophe swung his giant sword at Jaehwan. He dodged it with a quick sidestep, only for the giant to lash out at him with his other hand. Sent flying back, Jaehwan crashed hard into a wall and coughed up a mouthful of blood. But Soul King Catastrophe was already charging in for another strike. Reacting just in time, Jaehwan slipped behind the monster and thrust his sword forward. The monster elongated his head to dodge the strike. Cackling, he boasted about how he had watched over all of creation to build this world. He said everyone was trying to climb to the top of the Tree of Illusions just to satisfy their curiosity. He knew Jaehwan, too, was searching for his own answers about this world. He asked what question Jaehwan was trying to answer, but Jaehwan remained silent, keeping up his defense while relentlessly striking back. Soul King Catastrophe began babbling to himself, constantly guessing what Jaehwan's burning question might be. Meanwhile, the two continued their frantic clash. Soul King Catastrophe clearly had the upper hand, leaving Jaehwan wondering what the hell this guy had been rambling about this whole time. Jaehwan realized this situation felt incredibly familiar. He thought back to that big torrent monster from before. Jaehwan realized with a start that the enemy he was fighting was just a replica connected to the main host. Taking a deep breath, he delivered a straight thrust, tearing Soul King Catastrophe to shreds. Yet, the monster just kept on rambling. Insanely, his hunch was spot on, as he could see the guiding thread just like before. If this was just a replica, there had to be a connection point to the main body. Gripping his sword tight, Jaehwan plunged it straight down into that spot. Soul King Catastrophe's eyes bulged in shock. This was impossible. It was the ultimate technique of rupture. His body began to evaporate, completely unable to regenerate. Before fading away completely, Soul King Catastrophe left a parting threat, saying he'd meet Jaehwan at the entrance to the abyss. Jaehwan collapsed to the ground, gasping heavily for air. He told himself he needed to get much stronger. Standard thrusts wouldn't be enough. He needed a wider arsenal, especially a powerful slash technique. Slashes were perfect for dealing with large armies. But against a single, powerful opponent, the area of effect was too wide, rendering it much less effective. This time, he had only used it as a distraction to buy himself some time. Jaehwan needed a new skill, a specialized technique meant for one-on-one combat against powerful foes. By the time Jaehung and Yurin returned, the place was in utter ruins, and Chunghu was completely knocked out. Having regained consciousness, the Fortress Lord called Jaehwan over, saying he had something to tell him. He began to pour his heart out, admitting that while he had turned into a bloodthirsty fiend, he had still been watching Jaehwan all along. He was deeply grateful to Jaehwan for fighting so hard against Soul King Catastrophe. The Fortress Lord grasped Jaehwan's hand tightly, whispering weakly, "It is time for Gorgon to change." He then channeled a bright golden light into Jaehwan. Mysterious glowing characters slowly began to form on Jaehwan's arm. Closing his eyes in deep satisfaction, the Fortress Lord felt a strange sense of familiarity with Jaehwan. He could feel the warmth of the memories harbored deep within the young man. As the Fortress Lord slowly turned to dust, a gentle smile graced his face. He pleaded with Jaehwan to never let the hope in his heart die out. Just then, the soldiers finally arrived. Dragging his exhausted body up, Jaehwan stood before them. As soon as the crowd caught sight of the mark on his arm, they immediately fell to their knees. With tears welling in his eyes, Yurin finally understood. This was the Fortress Lord's final wish, to pass the mantle to a new ruler. The kneeling crowd respectfully hailed Jaehwan as the new Lord of Gorgon. 2 days later, the fortress began its long process of reconstruction. Jaehwan vehemently refused, insisting that he had absolutely no interest in becoming the Lord, and that anyone else could take the job. Left with no other choice, Yurin reminded him of his promise. He had promised to save the Lord and kill the traitor, but now that the Lord had passed away, it was Jaehwan's responsibility to step up and rule Gorgon. Jaehwan felt a massive headache coming on. How on earth did things turn out like this? He had zero time to waste lingering around this fortress. He had to reach the abyss. He desperately wanted to pass the lordship off to someone else, but Yurin immediately shut him down. That's impossible. Gorgon will never accept anyone else. The fortress only recognizes the seal currently on your arm. That's why you can't just transfer the title of Lord to whoever you want. The ruler of Gorgon only changes when the current ruler is no longer of this world. Yurin slammed a thick stack of documents onto the desk, demanding that Chuan finish reviewing them by the end of the day. Since Chuan was brand new to the role of Lord, Yurin had included some extra notes and files to help him get up to speed. Chuan pulled out a sheet of paper and began to read. It was the Law of Gogol. These laws were honestly kind of hilarious. No wonder the locals always spoke so highly of their lord. Yurin pointed out a few useful items in the desk drawer before heading out to organize his own duties, telling Chuan to call him if he needed anything at all. Chuan opened the drawer to take a look. Inside, he found a crumpled ball of paper with the words, "The 17th Ruler," scribbled on it. Suddenly, the paper ball twitched, automatically folding itself into the shape of a tiny old man. It then cheerfully greeted Chuan. It said that even though it didn't know who he was, finding this meant he had officially become the new ruler. And naturally, He was probably wondering how on earth to govern Gogol Castle. Jaehwan could only stare as the paper figure kept rambling on and on. A cold sweat broke out on his neck. Paper magic? Was this some kind of paper doll animated by spiritual energy? Unfazed, the paper figure kept talking, explaining that the absolute only duty of a ruler was to find joy. A truly great ruler was someone who simply enjoyed life. Castle security could be handled by the guards, and domestic and foreign affairs were best left to the specialists. The Lord didn't have to lift a finger. Apparently, that had been the tradition here since the very beginning. According to the data the paper figure compiled, over half of the previous rulers had actually worked themselves to death, completely exhausting both their bodies and souls. None of them lived very long. So, this piece of advice wasn't just for Jaehwan. It was for the survival of Gogol itself. It pleaded with him not to get greedy, not to try and change a single thing, and above all, never burn himself out. Everyone in this place knew how impossible it was to change this world. That was why Jaehwan should focus on maintaining the status quo, and only change things very slowly, bit by bit. He shouldn't make decisions just to please the majority. He needed to act solely according to his own heart and will. This was a painful, hard-learned lesson from the former lord. The paper figure repeated it over and over, begging Jaehwan not to get greedy and not to attempt to change things beyond his control. In the end, the only good ruler in chaos was a ruler who did absolutely nothing. Having finished its speech, the little paper figure collapsed back into a simple, crumpled ball. Jaehwan fell into a deep silence. He was finally starting to understand what it truly meant to be a ruler in this place. They were a presence designed to crush all hope of survival, a force meant to prevent the very changes that had kept this place running for generations. Noticing his long silence, Jaehwan spoke up and asked what was on his mind. Jaehwan had made up his mind. He was going to completely abolish the position of Gogol's ruler. Jaehwan stared at him, utterly bewildered by his words. Jaehwan then asked him, "What is a fortress?" Though Jaehwan found the question incredibly basic, he still answered seriously. A fortress is a stronghold, and a stronghold is a military structure built to protect allies from their enemies. Jaehwan pressed further. What if those enemies no longer existed? What happens if there is absolutely no one left to invade the fortress? Jaehwan froze as a realization dawned on him. If that were the case, the fortress would have no reason to exist, and a ruler would no longer be needed. But to Jaehwan, a fortress without enemies was a complete impossibility. Jaehwan, however, confidently declared otherwise. It would be possible, because he was going to unify all of chaos. Traditional funerals would no longer exist. Instead, they would celebrate the Soul Festival to cheerfully send off those who had vanished forever. While a funeral was a ritual to remember the dead, the Soul Festival was a ritual to let them go. During the festival, the story of the departed soul would be retold over and over again. It was the very last gift that chaos could offer to those who had departed from this world. Jaehwan stood before the crowd to host the Soul Festival. The name of the former lord was Imil Rose, and they were unable to bury him. This was the only thing they could do to honor his memory. The crowd listened in solemn silence. Jaehwan stood leaning against the window. Hearing the former lord's name, he finally realized who that eccentric person was, the one who had practically forced him into this role. All around him, Jaehwan could hear the quiet whispers of the crowd. They were highly skeptical about whether someone like Jaehwan could actually handle being the lord. Suddenly, Jaehwan noticed someone standing right next to him. It was a veiled woman, looking at him with a soft smile. Just then, a very short man slithered over to introduce himself. Meanwhile, Jaehwan seemed to recognize the veiled woman. The two of them quietly chatted about the annoying old man who had just approached Jaehwan. Right on cue, the old man chimed in, asking Jaehwan how old he actually was. Jaehwan answered honestly, "Probably around 60. The old man kept probing, trying to find out if he was the son of the former ruler. But Jaehwan could easily read every single thought running through his mind, as well as those of the onlookers waiting for some drama. The old man extended his hand and introduced himself as Jang In-han, the president of the Deep Forest Scholar Society. He mentioned he'd heard rumors that Jaehwan was a rather uncooperative fellow. Deep down, the old man felt that he could finally make up for the humiliating subservience he had to endure in Gogol 15 years ago. Back then, he had begged for permission to establish a branch office in Gogol, all while secretly bribing the guards stationed at the Northern Watchtower. He had been arrested by Carlton, and then flatly rejected by the former ruler. But now, that old ruler has already kicked the bucket. As for Carlton, the guy who locked him up, he is currently clinging to life in the hospital. And the new ruler? He is nothing but a wet-behind-the-ears brat. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Jaehwan reaches out to shake hands with Jang Il-han. The old man seizes this chance to cast his highest-level illusion skill on the boy. Jaehwan sees the gates of hell swing open behind him, with a massive fire dragon stepping out. The onlookers can already see that he is looking a bit off. They all silently realize that Jang Il-han has unleashed his 9 circles of hell technique on him. The leader of the savant scholars is feeling pretty smug. After all, this is his ultimate illusion technique. He is absolutely sure Jaehwan is trapped in a fiery, hellish illusion, with the red dragon looming right before his eyes. Any second now, the kid will start crying and screaming, forced to submit to his every demand. But instead, Jaehwan just smirks, delivering a silent slap to Jang Il-han's face. He grips the old man's hand tightly. You guys certainly have a unique way of greeting people here. Now, let me return the favor. Jang Il-han's eyes widen as he starts to tremble. Jaehwan casts soul derangement on him, and suddenly, the old man sees himself trapped in hell. Jang Il-han is scared out of his wits, almost wetting his pants as his face turns pale. He collapses to his knees, completely paralyzed, while the surrounding crowd starts whispering in shock again. Jaehwan calmly hands down his judgment, since Jang Il-han dared to insult the ruler. Normally, he would have beaten the man to teach him a lesson, but this time, he decides to show some mercy and spare his life. But there won't be a next time. Chung Heo scoffs, muttering, "Is the show over already? How boring." Up next is Jaehwan's inauguration speech. For some reason, Chung Heo suddenly gets a really bad feeling about this. And he is totally right to worry. Jaehwan stands before the crowd and speaks with brutal honesty. I don't know who the hell Emil Groshek is, what he accomplished, how he lived, or what kind of ruler he was. To be completely blunt, I don't give a damn. I know you're not happy with me. You probably think I'm just some kid with mediocre spiritual strength who only became the ruler out of pure luck. And honestly, you're not entirely wrong. I never planned on this. Becoming your ruler was completely unexpected. You're unhappy with me, and I don't even want this position. So, how could this possibly end well? After thinking it over for about 30 seconds, I've come up with a solution to this problem. He tells them that anyone who can defeat him in a one-on-one fight will become the new ruler. Hearing this, the crowd is stunned at first, but then, one man slams his hand on the table and laughs. Haha, he is Cayman, the leader of the South Sea clan. He asks Jaehwan if there are any other conditions. Jaehwan adds a time limit of 1 month. Anyone who challenges him and loses must join the Abyss Expedition team, which will set off in 2 months. The crowd is left completely speechless. Yurin, however, has absolute faith in Jaehwan. Jaehwan had protected Gorgon from enemies, and he was recognized by the former lord himself, even when the boy makes wild, nonsensical claims about destruction, or even uniting chaos. Even though Jaehwan's speech leaves everyone feeling extremely uneasy, Yurin decides to wait and see what he does next. He believes Jaehwan wouldn't do things without a good reason. Yurin has faith, but reality has a way of being harsh. Early the next morning, Jaehwan bursts into Yurin's room with terrible news. Yurin rushes to Jaehwan's room, looking ready to kill, demanding to know how many unfinished tasks the boy has let pile up. But the guy he is looking for is nowhere to be found. Instead, there is only Carlton, covered in bandages, sitting there working on the paperwork. Yurin is absolutely furious, wondering where on earth Jaehwan has sneaked off to this time. At that moment, Jaehwan and Chung Heo are down in the basement breaking statues. Having just come up with a new move, Jaehwan gets into position to demonstrate it to Chung Heo. Chung Heo compliments him, noting that Jaehwan's posture looks much better than usual. Judging by the movement of his sword, the old doctor guesses that Jaehwan must have been influenced by his own swordplay. Chung Heo suggests a cool name like Pierce, but Jaehwan just looks at him with pure disgust. Chung Heo throws a fit, having finally had enough of this treatment. As a legendary doctor, he can't believe he is being bossed around by an arrogant punk like Jaehwan. Jaehwan completely tunes him out, pretending to be deaf as he thrusts his sword straight at Chung Heo. The old man frantically dodges, cursing Jaehwan up and down and calling him a disrespectful brat. Jaehwan's attack barely grazes him, stabbing directly into the wall behind. From behind the wall, someone falls out with a thud. It's Yundong, the leader of the Lightning God clan. He is completely knocked out now, having spent the last few minutes sniffing around like a dog trying to find Jaehwan. A dog's pure instinct guided him down into this basement. Yunwan came here looking to solo Jaehwan and take the top spot. He didn't care if people called it cowardly, he couldn't care less. To Yunhwan, whether it was an assassination or a one-on-one duel, it was all the same as long as he took his opponent down. Suddenly, Yunhwan felt a massive tremor. Peeking out, he realized all the rumors he'd heard about Jaehwan were completely off. Yunhwan aggressively stepped out to challenge Jaehwan, fully confident he would win. Chung-he sighed, wondering how a clan leader like Yunhwan could resort to a sneaky sneak attack. Did he have no shame? Jaehwan didn't pay him any mind. He just told Yunhwan to bring it on already. With sparks flying, Yunhwan lunged forward to attack, practically imitating Pikachu. He confidently unleashed his ultimate move, Descent of the Lightning God, firing a massive ball of electricity straight at Jaehwan. But before he could even do anything, Jaehwan slipped behind him and slammed him face first into the dirt. After getting thrashed, Yunhwan instantly fell in line. Sucking up to Jaehwan with a big grin, he promised to do whatever he said and follow him from then on. Yunhwan came from a powerful family in the Great Lands 100 years ago. It took him exactly 100 years to reach this place. To put it bluntly, Yunhwan was nothing more than a slave to the Yun family. His fellow comrades who raided the tower with him also became part of the family, living out their remaining days together. But one by one, they were sent to the battlefield or died as mere slaves. And just like that, Yunhwan slaved away for nearly 100 years under the Yun family. Most of his comrades who had become his lackeys were already dead and gone. Yet, miraculously, Yunhwan survived. Thanks to the trust he built up over those 100 years, he finally earned the rank of a personal attendant. However, on the very day he became an attendant, Yunhwan decided to defy his fate for the first time in his life. He couldn't keep living like this. Yunhwan threw away the trust he had built up over an entire century. He successfully stole the Yun family's highly prized secret art along with their ultimate skill. The skill he acquired was the Lightning God art. Once Yunhwan mastered it, every single cell in his body was purified, allowing him to tap into the absolute limits of the Lightning God art. Of course, because of that, the Yun family hunted him for 25 years, and he was eventually decapitated after being summoned to chaos. But thanks to that same Lightning God art, Yunhwan held the number 9 spot among the 10 devils of chaos for 100 years. That is why Yunhwan couldn't accept it. How could someone like Jaehwan, who hadn't even lived for 100 years, rule over all of chaos? Besides, Dr. Chung-Hu knew despair better than anyone, thanks to his time with the Abyss expedition team. He smiled again, softly chuckling at Yunhwan, telling him he should consider himself lucky to have crossed paths with Jaehwan before tasting true despair. Meanwhile, Jaehwan was still focused on breaking the stone statues. Yunhwan pouted, still looking completely unconvinced. Chung-He patiently explained that a week before Yunhwan arrived in Gorgon, this place was nearly wiped out by the Golden Sky Clan. He didn't even know how they managed to sway Gorgon's people to defect to their side, but he had a strong feeling they had been planning Gorgon's downfall for a very long time. However, Jaehwan pulled Gorgon back from the brink of ruin and defeated the Poison King inside the former Fortress Lord's body. Stunned, Yunhwan complained, asking Chung-Hu why he hadn't mentioned any of this sooner. Chung-He fired right back, blaming Yunhwan for jumping the gun and trying to assassinate the guy before even listening to an explanation. As the two bickered, someone else arrived. The newcomer was a massive, imposing man. He wanted to challenge Jaehwan, and he was none other than the leader of the Fire King clan, Kang Huang. Beside him stood the leader of the South Sea clan, though Kang Huang insisted on fighting first. Jaehwan casually rested his sword on his shoulder. He didn't want to waste time, so he told them both to come at him together. He was busy perfecting his swordsmanship and had no time for delay. The leader of the Fire King clan smirked. Charging forward, he coated himself in flames and lunged at Jaehwan. But Jaehwan effortlessly sidestepped the attack. From the sidelines, Chung-Hu screamed, yelling at them not to burn the whole place down. Over on the battlefield, the two closed the distance, swords at the ready. The Fire King leader was still bursting with confidence, while Jaehwan remained completely unfazed. He punched the Fire King leader's sword, spun around, gripped his own blade, and delivered a swift, light thrust. The Fire King leader was blasted 10 billion meters away, leaving a deep crater in the wall. Next up was the leader of the South Sea clan. Swirling water and frost enveloped him as he braced himself to face Jaehwan. Jaehwan sighed in annoyance. First lightning, then fire, and now water. Was this guy really any stronger than the last one? Jaehwan dashed forward to open the attack. The South Sea clan leader calmly blocked the blow. Jaehwan immediately sensed that this opponent was different. Unlike the other two who just recklessly lunged at him, this man was trying to control his movements. The South Sea clan leader swung his blade downward, prompting Jaehwan to leap up and strike from above. The South Sea clan leader quickly fell back to dodge, fully aware of what would happen if the blow connected. That last attack would have literally ground him to dust. The Namhai sect leader sheathed his sword and admitted defeat before even showing his true power. Having agreed to sit down and discuss the Abyss expedition, the three defeated fighters are now huddled up together. The Fire King sect leader is screaming in the face of the Lightning Saint Guild master. He refuses to accept it. How is it that Jun Dong only suffered a minor setback, while he was the one who got absolutely humiliated? Jun Dong, on the other hand, acts like he hears absolutely nothing, casually whistling as he completely tunes them out. Well, now that they have lost, all they can do is swallow their pride and join the Abyss expedition. What other choice do they have? As for the Namhai sect leader, Kamen, his goal from the start wasn't actually to overthrow Qian Guan, he just wanted a spot on the expedition team. You see, Kamen was actually a close friend of the former city lord, but he couldn't join the previous Abyss expedition because he simply wasn't strong enough back then. Back then, when all their achievements were snatched away and everyone lost all hope, Kamen witnessed the utter collapse of the expedition team. That was 900 years ago. Ever since then, Kamen has been training relentlessly, waiting for this exact moment. And as for the Fire King sect leader,